Welcome back to LivAnimated.com. Let's learn something new. I have a very important guest with me. We've worked together before in the past at Red 5 Studios. Andrew Brownell. I'm saying your name right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right,
yeah,
awesome.
You got it.
Awesome. So if you're new to the show, what we're doing here is we are making sure that if you're an enthusiast or if you're already in the games industry, we're talking to professionals that actually do the work in the field and talk about their history, their schooling, and how they got to the position they're in so that it can help others. So let's just jump right into it. So Andrew, you are at Fox Next, and you are a lead combat designer. So what does a lead combat designer do? You don't have to go into particulars because I know NDAs and stuff like that, but what does a lead combat designer do?
So the way I sort of describe it is I'm like the gameplay designer. So anything that like you're actually doing in like the moment-to-moment gameplay of a game is like our game, which I can talk about a little bit, is sort of like RTS. The gameplay is sort of similar to a game like Clash Royale. It's on mobile. So basically, like I design the various types of units that you can deploy. We actually have two factions, so we have trying to get like asymmetric gameplay between the two factions. And I basically design like all of those sort of gameplay interactions. And there's a lot of like things like play balance. I design the AI so that when you play against a computer, it's fun and engaging and whatnot. So we have some amount of like PvE content, so creating that kind of content. But it's basically like the sort of the core guts of the game. That's like that's what I work on.
That's pretty awesome. That's
fun.
So what we're gonna do now, I like to go way back. So we're gonna go back in time a little bit. Yeah, nice. We're gonna go back to the beginning of when you started your education. So Villa Park High School, is that in California?
Local. Yeah, it's local. It's
local. Okay.
Yeah, it's in Orange County. Yeah, so I've lived in Southern California my whole life. So
oh wow, okay.
I've been sort of lucky to be able to stay around in the same area. So
now, did you know when you were in high school that I want to go into games? Now it's 1997, mind you.
Yeah,
so,
I'm an old man.
So PlayStation 1 was already out.
Yeah.
So Tomb Raider dropped. It's 2 years after that. I don't know what the big game claim to fame was at that point, but I know Tomb Raider was big in 95.
So I was always like a big like Blizzard gamer, like
okay.
the whole time when I was coming up. So like StarCraft was like my bread and butter in high school. Like I played so much StarCraft. I probably had 20,000 games of StarCraft or something.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was what it was about for sure. But yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I started out playing on like Nintendo and Super Nintendo and stuff. But by the time I got to high school, I was pretty much like a PC gamer.
Oh wow! So
like
you became PC gamer pretty early, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But like I think it was actually like the Blizzard RTSs and then like Command and Conquer and like I was super into like sort of strategy games and whatnot. So that's
awesome. So when you were at high school, did you have programs that kind of got you into it, or was it still just a hobby at that point? Were you taking classes where you were designing things with other kids and like testing maps, doing some kind of D&D type stuff?
I wish they had that stuff. No? So back then, I mean, like they really didn't have much in terms of like, and so I wanted to be in games. Like I kind of knew that from a pretty early age, actually. When I was in high school, we had a senior project, and like mine was like designing a game, and I made like this big design doc, which is like you think at the time is a real thing, but like I don't know how true that is now, but that was like my senior project, and I got together a few of my friends, and we like sort of created our own little startup that really didn't go anywhere, but it got us into E3. And so I went around and like talked to a bunch of people that were in the industry at the time when I was a kid. So I was like 18 years old. So that was pretty awesome.
Now you said GDD. So for the people watching, what is a GDD? And at that point, how did you know what a GDD was?
So I mean that's why at the time there were a handful of books. I mean it was like I know back when they had paper books and it was crazy, but yeah there was this book. It was called like the architecture like game design and architecture or something like that. It's this big orange book. It's about the only book I could find that was like actually talked about game design as a thing. And I used to nerd out about like I think like Blizzard was one of the first companies that they started talking about like game design as a discipline. There's some discussion around that at like EA, and there's a handful of like these little pockets of game design, but it really wasn't a thing that like people understood. So when I heard that was a job as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's what I want to do.
That's awesome.
But so yeah, so I mean I definitely read some books and whatnot, but like I got really into this idea of like wanting to study games as an idea, like how like past. I had a lot of friends that also played games, and like we'd geek out about the games we were playing at the time. We'd play against each other and whatever. But like I always felt like our discussions were very like.
Like deep.
Well, no. So in some cases they were deep, but like there was like a lack of understanding. Like there was a lot more going on that like the people who made the games clearly understood that like we didn't get yet. Okay. And as I started to like dig into that as an idea and read books and like I said, like sort of study the games that I liked, it started to make me go like, oh wow, there's actually a lot more here, and like I want to do that, and I want to like be really good at the idea of like how do you create stuff that's fun and compelling and engaging and whatnot.
That's pretty cool. So you mentioned you did a lot of writing and reading. Did you do anything like programmatic side? Because I remember when we worked together, there's a lot of coding and scripting that goes on. Did you put your hands in that a little bit at that age as well? Or no?
I did. I used some of like the map tools that were in a handful of games, but I didn't really get into programming that much. It was interesting. Is like at the time there wasn't anything like Unity or like
That's
any
true.
sort of like tool that like you could do almost like scripting.
I mean,
and make
wasn't
games.
Unreal? Didn't Unreal have the editor that came with
I mean, there was
Quake
like,
and stuff, or
there was like that sort of. You could make like levels.
Okay,
in,
modding.
In
it was
stuff. It was more like modding, but like the thing is, at the time, I remember I had a friend in high school that was into coding, and it just seemed like he was doing like some sort of alien language thing. Like it was like totally outside my understanding. And I actually did when I was in high school. They had like a college sort of class you could take that was it was like computer engineering, and I thought like, okay, that'll be like my step in, and it ended up being much more about like circuits and circuit boards and stuff, and I ended up like losing interest in it and sort of being like, oh, maybe this isn't what I want to do.
Right. So like the computer science side of things, where you're like, that's not.
Yeah, but like programming as a thing like was always something I was kind of interested in. Like I was always into computers, so growing up like always into computers, and so like I remember like they used to.
What was your first? Do you remember your first computer?
I had an Apple IIe.
An Apple IIe?
Yeah.
Nice. Mine was a PAL 286.
Nice,
It's old.
Yeah, rage.
One of those sideways ones.
Yeah. But like so, both my parents are teachers, and so
that's cool.
they like I think that's why we had an Apple. And then growing up with it, like I think they kind of encouraged me to I don't know, be interested in computers or whatever. So I was kind of like a bit of a dork with that stuff, and so I remember like getting called out of class to go fix like printers for teachers and stuff.
That's good,
like,
man. They knew they were priming you. They're priming.
No, I
you.
mean, that was the thing. So it definitely was a thing that was always like in the back of my in my back pocket was like just being into technology. I think generally. So. But yeah, the programming is interesting because it's like when I was a kid, there just wasn't. It wasn't the same level of accessibility. Like unless you were full on like going to computer science school, it was like crazy. It was like very, very.
It wasn't easy to pick up and just be like, oh, I'm gonna do this over the weekend.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's funny because I hear stories of people who got in the industry and like that's how they got in, is like programming games, and I'm always like super impressed because that seemed like insane to me.
The hardest route to get in.
Yeah. Well, and the thing was that like when I was looking at games, like the part of games that interested me, that was always like the part that like I didn't get excited about. Like the actual like making like scripting and stuff at the time didn't really like, it wasn't like the thing I was geeked up about. Like I wanted to tell stories and make gameplay and do like, it's like very like like actual like game gut sort of stuff. And so
more like the creative development.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because it's like I think now I'm not super like lore driven as a thing, but I remember like being younger and wanting to do like choose your own adventure style RPGs and stuff. Is like super into that.
Yeah, the times are different now.
Yeah,
things are really different.
It is for sure.
That's pretty cool. So I see we jumped to 2013, so we're gonna bypass that. And it looks like so you went to California State University Long Beach, but you went back for a certification, but that's later. So we'll go back to that when we get back. So when you went to California State University Long Beach, magna cum laude, congratulations. I know it's difficult to stay at that caliber. What were some of the things when you went to college? Like, did you base your curriculum on getting into games or maintaining what it was, or were you said your parents were teachers? Were they trying to push you to go towards another route, like like law, doctor, something like that? But I see you have a bachelor's of arts, so yes. But
Sure, yeah.
did you build out your curriculum based towards games though, or was it just like I just need to learn some art, I just need to learn some things from that degree?
Yeah. So I mean, actually, so if you go up a tiny bit more, just a little bit. The first thing I actually like right out of high school. So
oh wow,
literally,
2001.
When I was 18 years old, I went straight to QA at Blizzard.
Nice.
Which, like I said, like I was a total Blizzard fanboy growing up. Like that was like it was like my dream come true. It was a very, very like lucky thing, and like that was like Blizzard was 200 people when I joined.
Oh wow,
it was like
early,
this tiny little thing.
So were you were quality assurance, but was this a internship or was this like you were just full blown working there?
I was full blown working there.
Wow.
I got like super lucky. Like I had a like a friend of a friend happened to know how into like games and stuff that I was.
Yeah.
And when I don't actually even know how I got the idea in my head that like I could even get a job there, you know, but like when we had a conversation about it, they like asked a person and like I just managed to like somehow get through the door. And at the time I was like the youngest person working there. It was kind of bonkers. So.
That was really early for them. Like what was the Warcraft 3? Was that the big game at the time that you were testing?
Yeah, that was it. I tested it for like a whole year. It was like classic, Reign of Chaos. It's pretty awesome. So and like that's the thing is like one of the biggest like eye-opening moments was going from the state of like I wanted to be in games to like being in games. Yeah. And all of a sudden you learn how like much more pragmatic it is as a thing. Like
it's very eye-opening.
Yeah, right.
That's crazy.
So anyway, so I did that, but like one of the things, and this is back when you hear all these terror stories about crunch and stuff.
Yes.
I definitely had some shifts of like 36-hour like stretches.
But you get paid OT with you were a contractor.
That was true. And I was getting paid nothing, because you're in QA. So that was like that was actually a video. You're like, oh, I'm making pretty good money, but like I basically am sleeping at work. But the thing is like seeing that, and then as we like finished up that project, the thing I was noticing was that there were some people that I was with that had already gone to college, and they were definitely like a step ahead of me. And I could feel like, okay, like I had always planned to go to college, but like I had this crazy opportunity to work at Blizzard, whatever. I'm of course going to do it. But I was like, okay, I'm going to actually like put this down and go. So after we shipped War 3, we were all contractors, so they were gonna like let us all go and then rehire everybody like 6 months later or something. And I was like, well, okay, maybe I'll come back in 6 months. We'll see. And if not, I'll just like focus on like because I was going to college part time. I was taking like 1 or 2 classes a semester, and I would have graduated in 18 years
just to be enrolled or whatever.
Yeah, basically just because I wanted to be going to college, but it was just like sort of just barely squeaking out time here or there. Yeah. So then to your other question, which was like,
now you're going to college. Yes. You got a taste of the working man's life.
Correct.
So you're like, I have a plan now. So what was your plan going into? Is that just Cal State LB, or how do you say it?
Okay. It's
Cal
ULB. Okay. So Cal State Long Beach. It's like probably a lot of people say it. But yeah, like so that my now wife at the time was actually going there. We started dating when we were in junior high, and
that can be tricky.
So we were dating all the way through high school and college, and so she was going to this school, and so it was kind of convenient to go there. So
there's something good about that, because you didn't have to worry about trying to get into a relationship or trying to date or trying to do certain things. True. It keeps you focused on like, as long as everything's good there, it keeps you focused on the work that you're trying to do. So that's good.
I would say having like a wonderful person you can count on,
support,
like that support is like is pretty. I feel very lucky to have that. So
that's awesome. But going to college, like, what was your curriculum like? What were some of the classes you took that you feel have helped you get to where you are?
So one of the things is like I was sort of tinkering around with a lot of different like majors, and so like that's one of the biggest things is like I knew because I had seen what games were and like what the skills that I wanted to have but I didn't have. I was sort of just dabbling in a lot of different things, which of course isn't a major or anything. So I think like I probably could have been done faster maybe, but like what I was actually trying to do was actually learn things. So I remember taking up a handful of Photoshop classes, a handful of like 3D modeling classes. I took a Flash. I know Flash isn't a thing anymore, but I took like a Flash class.
It was fun when it was here,
where we made like websites and some animations and stuff, and like that was cool to like learn. but yeah, I was just like picking up. I think I took a couple like web classes, a computer science classes, like just a little bit of everything. And I actually looked into like making a game design major at my school, which was like you could do that, but it was going to be like so intensive to like build that program out by myself that I was like, okay, I could do that, or I could find a degree that like I could sort of finish college somewhat quickly, which is what I ended up doing, which is I've always been interested in history. And as I was mentioning, like I'm definitely not a lore head.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of like, okay, I've done all these like tech oriented things. I've taken some art. I've taken, like what's the stuff that I don't, like I may be interested in, but I don't have that breadth in. And so I actually thought like, okay, I took a couple courses and I kind of fell in love with a couple of the subjects that some of the teachers that happened to be at that school. And they've just inspired me to like want to learn more. And
That's
so
awesome.
there was a period of time there, like towards the end, where I was like, maybe I'm going to become a professor in history, because I just thought like it was super interesting. My degree was in like ancient history and Japanese history, which was
wow,
like,
yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's just like I just love like that the literature of like people. And one of the things that's really interesting is just how you'll tend to encounter this stuff that it's written thousands of years ago in some cases, and it's just so like still relevant today in terms of like there's just these writing where they're talking about picking up on girls in like the turn of the millennium, I guess, or whatever, like around the time of Christ, as they say. So it's just, I don't know, it's really interesting, and there's just so much stuff there that I just found compelling. So
has any of the stuff that you've learned, have you been able to apply that to a game yet from your history, what you learned about history?
So the thing I would tell anybody, especially because that's like the way this is focused, is that the thing I learned in college is sort of like how to think. Yeah. It does, like the actual specific stuff you learn is really unimportant, and like
that's true.
At least for me, that's how I felt, is that like I learned a bunch of like things about a lot of different subjects, but like what I kind of picked up on was like being curious, like what are the things that I'm interested in, like let's go read another book about that thing, because like I'm just interested in it, like that's cool. It's like find those things you're excited about and like geek up about them, and like get in the mud and like figure it out. So
but I mean, like that ancient history, you're like, hey, that inspired you. You like that? Like, have you ever been able to make a game where you're like, dude, I went to college for this. This is amazing. I'm using, like you're going way back, like that Ratatouille moment.
So like right now, like the game that I'm working on is so it's based on James Cameron's Avatar. And so one of the factions is the Na'vi, and they're sort of like maybe Stone Age to like Bronze Age, like sort of technology. And so we are working directly with Lightstorm, which is like the production company that makes
awesome.
that franchise. And it's been very helpful, I think, to just have like there is that background knowledge of like knowing, hey, these are the sorts of like technologies that existed in a similar sort of civilization. So I mean, it definitely comes up. There's definitely cases where you
have elements of like
it.
what you can take from real history and apply it to this history of this movie genre.
So it definitely comes up, but it's honestly like it was more something that I'm still pretty interested in, and I think it's good. It's worth going to college. I don't know how worth it is some of the really expensive programs, but for me it wasn't crazy expensive, and I think I got a lot out of it. So
that's pretty awesome. So you had your first job. So right after school, it looks like you were working again at 2004, multiplayer tournament manager.
That was why I was in school. So there is this. If you go back to like the Blizzard thing, I came out of that playing Warcraft 3, and I worked on that game for a long time. But I actually liked the game a lot. Like I just enjoyed it quite a bit. And so after I left, while I was in college, you have a lot of free time in college. So I played a lot of Warcraft 3. I got pretty good at it, actually. And so I was like one of the top players in the country at a point. And so there was this company called NGA, which they don't exist anymore, tier, but basically like that they were doing tournaments and like organizing like leagues and whatnot for Counter-Strike and Warcraft 3 and a couple other games. And I just happened to play in one of their events and finish kind of high, but they had like, hey, we're hiring people on their like website or whatever. So I just reached out to them and said like, hey, whatever. And I had this like opportunity to like help run tournaments with them. And as opposed to at the time, nowadays everybody's like, oh, esports is this big thing. You could be a pro gamer or whatever. back then, that really wasn't a thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the most I made in a tournament ever was like $1,000, which was like mind blowing.
Yeah, that was a lot at the time because
it
you're
was
like, I'm sitting
insane.
here like clickety clacking around and like using a computer and
Yeah, it was
making
nuts.
money off
It was
of it.
nuts.
Yeah.
But that was like hey, I could actually go and work with a bunch of people who were trying to like sort of make esports a thing.
That's
and
crazy.
like sort of kick that off. So I went there. I was there for about a year or so, I want to say. And
Yeah.
but it was like while I was in college, it was part time. It wasn't like any sort of like huge commitment or anything. But we did some big tournaments, some like national tournaments and stuff.
That's cool.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty fun.
Did you get a chance to meet a lot of people that you're still communicate with today, or no? It kind of in the past.
I definitely still have some friends from that time.
Oh, okay.
But like what's interesting is like a couple of the people in particular, like they went all in on that. And so I know a couple of people who now are like heads of esports at various
wow,
like,
that's
at,
cool.
like, various
So
studios.
they kept the dream alive.
So it's cool, yeah. And that's the thing is like I think like the experience of doing that, like it was fun, and I liked it because I was still doing stuff that was like games adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I still had the like sort of the itch that like I wanted to create stuff, like
Right.
I wanted to build stuff myself, and so I think that's the reason why like I think what ended up happening is that company ended up like shutting down. When they ended up shutting down, I didn't go like, well, now I'm going to go chase esports around the world and keep trying to like go after that. I was sort of like looking, okay, how can I get back into like actually
right.
building stuff in games?
So after that, did you go right to Rev 5 after that?
Yeah.
2004 to 2007. So you had a little bit of break there. Did you take a vacation or what
I-
happened there? Were you trying to assess
yeah.
like,
So I was in
what do I
school-
want to do?
So I was in school.
Okay.
But like, yeah, so, this is so funny because it's like all this stuff makes me sound so old. I feel like,
It's not that long ago, man.
yeah, you think
It'd be
but,
different if it was like 19 something in front of those numbers.
That's fair. So there was the whole poker boom. I don't know if anybody remembers the poker boom that happened around like the early 2000s.
World Star Poker and
Yeah, like all that stuff. Right?
Poker Stars, yeah.
So there were a bunch of Warcraft 3 players that they quit playing Warcraft 3 professionally, and they went and started playing like online poker and cleaning up, like doing really well. And I was like a very good Warcraft 3 player, and I was like, I wonder if I could do that same thing, right? So like when that company went out of business, I was like kind of just looking around for something, whatever.
Okay.
And I remember just downloading some random client and started playing, and so that became like my like part-time job, where like
Wow.
I basically paid for the rest of college, bought my first car, like.
Oh my God, this is all just from online poker. This is before it got regulated, right?
Yeah, so that was the thing is like it's like right before I started at Red 5, like maybe 6 months before or something, is like there was a law that was passed that made it
God,
like
that's
really
crazy.
difficult to do it. And it sucked because like the couple months before that were like my biggest winning months. And I had like this thing, like this vision of like 5 years from now I'm going to retire and it's going to be crazy because I was just like cleaning up for a period.
So how did that work though? I mean, like you said you downloaded a client. Like were you just playing in like random chat rooms with people and you were just doing this, or was it how did that even work? I mean, I got onto Texas Hold'em late in life.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean it's a great game. It's a good
Yeah.
game. But no, so what it was, it's funny. So there was the internet was still a budding young place.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. But so there was basically like a lot more competition. And so because this was a space that was like just coming out of nowhere, but was very profitable, you had a bunch of companies that were all like starting to like, start companies doing poker online at the same time, but they want to incentivize people to go play on their sites. So if you kind of did a little bit of research, you could find out, well, okay, what are the different incentives on the different sites?
Okay.
And by leveraging those, and this thing that people call rake back, but it's basically the idea of like whenever you play a hand of poker, that the house is taking rake, they're taking like some amount of the pot every time.
Yes.
So then
That's
some
how
of
they pay
these,
themselves.
Yeah, right. Some of these companies would give you like 20 or 30% of the rake back.
Oh wow.
And so if you
For
could,
each hand.
each hand, they would give you your percentage, like
Okay.
like 20% of that.
Okay,
hand
what you
back.
played.
Right.
Okay.
So basically, though, like, and so the way like the players like me who were making a decent amount of money were doing it was that like you could play a lot of hands online, like way more hands than you could play if you were playing live. So like a typical table, like one table online probably does like double the hands that a live table does at least.
Yeah.
But I could play 18 to 24 tables at a time. Because
so you just open up that many clients and then just
Yeah,
be like
right.
click, 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 click.
Right. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
and if the reason, like I said, like these players like me who are RTS players, like there's that whole idea
That
of like actions per minute. You can do stuff really quickly. So it was basically like leveraging those skills in a different environment where you're just like needing to act very quickly, making decisions very, very quickly, and then doing that at such a scale that like you're playing thousands of hands a day. And so yeah, it was fun. It was fun while it lasted.
Cool.
It was pretty cool. But yeah, there was a period of time there where I was playing quite a bit of poker, which is pretty fun.
That never got you into day trading or anything?
No,
like, I mean, that seems like it'd fit in perfect now with this Bitcoin going on and all these altcoins.
Right.
Like, so what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, no, it's people talk to me. It's my occasionally somebody will be like, "Oh yeah, like, are you still playing or whatever?" Because I used to be pretty good, but I haven't played poker in anything seriously in probably like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something.
So you don't have those itches to like go to Vegas and be like, you know what, I want to try my hand and let's do this. And
no, I mean that's.
Or is it different when it's live and it's person to person? Like,
No, it's not that. It's actually one of the things for me is like I never had that itch. Like if you have, there's some people I think that like they like to gamble.
Yeah.
It was never gambling to me. Like I took it very seriously.
It was like work.
It was work. It was like work.
Yeah,
no, exactly. And I like read like 30 different books on poker and like was constantly watching like videos and listening to podcasts and stuff that were all like, it was like my focus all the time.
You were submerged
trying to like get really good at a thing.
Yeah.
And so I think approaching it that way, like when I stopped because like I got a job doing something I enjoyed more, it was just sort of like, all right. I never really played it after that.
I did not know that about you.
Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, so that's what that gap is.
Cool,
it's
man.
like, yeah.
That's cool and different.
It is. Yeah.
I can see it though. I can see it. All right, so you were here for 5 years at Red 5 Studios.
Yeah.
You came on to the scene as a level designer, world builder. What does a level designer / world builder do? And what makes those roles different? Why are they different titles?
Yeah. So the reason I put that is basically like a world builder is. Usually in like, so we were working on an MMO. You were there with me.
Yeah.
But so we had like an open world, right? So there's huge environments. There's various like jungles, plains, beaches, like huge play space. And so a world builder typically takes the various like kind of art assets that have been created by amazing artists, right? And sort of places them around in a configuration to kind of create an environment out of them. The thing that was different in this particular position was we actually also made all of our own textures. So that was actually kind of cool, actually. And I'd never, I mentioned earlier, like I had taken some classes in Photoshop. I'd taken college classes in Photoshop. That was my experience to Photoshop. I'd made a handful of things for fun on the side and did a little bit of like, hey, somebody needs a logo. I helped out, here or there, or whatever. But like hadn't really done anything serious in Photoshop. And this was like some pretty serious, like using lots of stamp tool and running scripts and stuff. And so I learned a ton on the job. I'm still really grateful to, I don't know if you ever worked with Matt Sanders at all, but I think he was probably gone by the time you got there. But he was when he worked for me, he was my boss. And he had been the lead level designer on Vanilla World of Warcraft. And one of the most talented, like, people I've ever worked with. Like he is just so freaking crazy. Like
that's awesome.
Very fast and just can get a really high, skill bar and all this stuff. It's really impressive. But the thing I really appreciated was he just sort of took me under his wing and just taught me like everything I knew about that job. And like I just learned so much. It was really cool. But I actually, over the course of, I don't know, 2 years or something, got pretty good at basically just taking photo ref and a bunch of stuff and like turning that into a kit that you could like create a beach like out of nothing.
Yeah.
Or create a, like a jungle scene or whatever play space. And so that's part of it. I think the level designer like half of that title is that, in this case we were making a shooter. And so there's also the side of, how does gameplay come into play with the environment. So you actually have things like, how are you going to occlude people, line of sight,
but you're setting that up, right? So like you're building out the world, and then in doing that, you're keeping in mind how you want to set up these encounters and set up these things in the world, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So at the time, like there were other designers that were thinking about, how do the guns work? How do the different character classes work? How do the systems in the game work? But then like you're laying that within a world where people can run around and fight one another and stuff. So we were talking about like how do you create a cool interior, and so like let's make a like sort of a what the equivalent of a prefab is, like make a gray box version of a building or something, and you could just place those around. How do we make those the right size, the right scale, so that they create the right kind of gameplay?
Right.
And it was really challenging in that project in particular because we were doing something at the time that had never really been done before.
Right.
The closest thing before that had been Planet Side.
Yeah.
And even that like wasn't at the scale of what we were trying to make.
Yeah, it was new, and it's weird when you think and look back now. A lot of games that are popular now
They
have
did it.
a very similar look, a feel, the armor, everything, and you're just like, oh. I was one of those believers where I was like, we're doing something here,
I mean, like to see one of the things is like when I think back about the game is like it's about 8 different games that could have been amazing. Like any of those games could have been incredible, and like to right afterwards see Overwatch and Destiny, and like both of those in particular are just such great games, and it's like we had the bits there.
Yeah.
We just didn't quite like focus enough.
And even with mechanics, like, I mean, I think one of the last things we were doing, we were jumping out of a drop ship, going down to the play space, and just playing the game, which is like what PUBG is.
Yeah.
But no one had that
mindset
mindset of being like, yes, it's a battle royale. Like, no one took it that extra step, So it was like, it was crazy. But I know you guys are using proprietary tools there. So what was the difference in using the tool where you could lay out everything? I know the world builder was like, you guys had to actually build the terrain by hand, and then paint it, as opposed to like if you've used anything like Unreal these days, it's very easy to do it.
Yeah, it's very easy. Yeah, so one of the, like I said, I mentioned Sanders before, but like one of the real benefits we had was we had the experience of somebody who had just built a ton of environments. And then we had this like amazing tools programmer who's like one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, Lutz. And so the two of them like got their heads together and just like built out this tools pipeline that was like very sort of simple to start with, but actually he cared a lot about usability.
Yeah.
And because he had been able, like basically they'd gotten the WoW pipeline to be really fast and efficient, and so he kind of wanted to get us there as fast as possible, Matt. So I think like that was a huge part of it. Is like the actual tools. Like there was a lot of nuance to using them.
Yeah.
It's definitely like an art tool, not just like a level building tool. Like a lot of the editors now, it's like literally you take the things and you're just jamming rocks into rocks and you've got an environment.
Right.
This wasn't like that at all.
It was a lot more smarter, I would think.
But it basically was using a height map, and the idea is you could take each like vert and you could raise it or lower it. The thing that was cool in our particular engine was you could also skew them, so in a direction. And so we had tools then you could like smooth things. So once you got really good at those tools, you could like build out a rock, but then actually like sculpt the geo to like make it look like a rock, and so it wasn't just like a flat surface with a texture painted on it.
Yeah.
It was really cool. So
yeah, I agree. I think once you get in and learn the tools, there's a lot that you could do and create on that project. Because I remember I didn't really have any limitations on that project other than the limitations of like the title and hey, you should be working on this. But yeah, there was a lot that you could do and I was impressed by that because that's all proprietary and it's all like stuff like you said they just wrote and we were using.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I mean, that team was like super. There's a lot of talented people.
It was, and you can tell that because a lot of people went off and did
amazing
things. Yeah, it's crazy.
Stuff. Yeah,
that's crazy, man. Oh, it's good times.
It's good. Yeah, it's good to think back on those times.
So you went from level designer and world builder for 2 years to going to game designer. So what makes game designer so differently? And then like, what were some of the things that you either learned or cherished or brought to the table in that regard?
Sure. So there was actually, I mean, you lived through some of the storied past at Red 5, but like,
all of it. I was there till it was done.
Yeah. But so early on, like that first, the first chunk I was there, like we had this core team of people, and there was a bunch of issues that like came into play with funding and all this sort of craziness, and so there was a point where the studio was almost going to shut down, and one of the sort of negative consequences but then slightly positive consequences for me was we lost a lot of really talented folks that like I really liked working with.
Yeah.
And one of those guys in particular, a fellow named Rob Garrett, who's definitely a solid friend of mine to this day. He was super talented, and he was always like sort of focused on how like you would use controls and UI to create an experience in the game in a really like sort of thoughtful way. And so I always kind of looked at what he was doing and was pretty interested in that. But then when he left, he actually went to Riot and went to work on League of Legends. And so there was this sort of big hole on the team. And I was sort of lucky at the time, as I just put my hand up and said like, hey, I would love to help out here. Like I see like there's a bunch of work. We don't have enough people to help out and do that stuff. Like what do you guys
let me do it?
What do you guys think? Can I jump in?
Yeah.
And I was just really lucky at the time if they were like, sure, let's throw you in there. Let's see what you can do. So I started working closely on like the UI and the systems with a couple of the other designers and building out a lot of the items in the game and some of the like the HUD and elements like the world map. And the one thing that was cool about that project in particular is that we always felt like we were short-staffed all the time on every thing. So it was one of those cool things. You get this in a startup, I think, but it's like if you put your hand up, generally people go like, all right, go for it. Try to do that thing. So there's stuff that I had never done before. I had no idea what I was doing, and like I took some swings, and sometimes you miss, but I had a lot. I learned so much, and there's also a bunch of stuff that I'm super proud of that like actually went well. So. Those are good times. But there's a lot of things about Red 5 that like I think afterwards, we're all kind of lamenting on or sad.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of really cool stuff about that place. There's some magic that was there. And one of the things that like I've seen from a lot of people who were there, who lived through the good times and the bad times, is sort of this ability to thrive in like change, like environments that change a lot. Like I have a bunch of people that I work with there that like you could throw them in like the craziest situation and they'll be like, cool, what do I do? How do I help? What do I need to do? And you're just like, you're awesome.
The team was really that's the one thing that I think management did a good job of building the team and getting people onto the team, because like you said, there were a lot of talented people there. I haven't been on a team of that size because it grew to be a very large team that was still very functional. Usually when teams get that large, they lose all that capability of being functional.
Right.
But like you said, we were very reliable. Even though there wasn't a crunch mentality there, but even though like things needed to get done, people would stay late, and like they really focused on the culture of a tribe. And I think that was one of the things that actually benefited us, being able to be adaptive to the ever-changing pace of like redesigning or changing based off player feedback and all that other stuff. Like I think that's the only thing that really helped us get through all that, because if that wasn't in place, I think more people would have dropped off like a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true for sure.
So, but
man,
it's
like
crazy.
The leadership there, it's interesting because I definitely feel like there's some people that I still really am glad to have worked with. James McCauley, who was like the executive producer there, like I could just think of like some of the things you're talking about, like how I think he did a really good job of fostering sort of like a community of like just like get in there and figure it out and
a good motivator.
But in a way that I think it was more about building the team up, which is like there was this moment I always think back on when I was working there, and this is the sort of thing where I think like it may benefit like telling a story if you're sort of on your way up of like being frustrated or being unable to like figure something out.
Okay.
I remember getting to this moment where one of the other designers had used we had like a visual scripting language we were using for a while. He had spawned a bunch of the NPCs in the world using this, and then had gotten busy or something, and they needed somebody to help out, so they had asked me to help. And I remember just getting like 2 steps in and being like, I don't understand how this is set up. It doesn't make any sense to me. And James, who was like literally our EP, he was like, well, hey, come here, come sit down with me and we'll figure it out. And like we literally like reverse engineered how this other designer had built this thing. And we just sat there. It took probably an hour and a half or whatever, but like step by step. And like it was like a teach a person to fish moment for me.
Yeah.
Like I used to look back and I'm like, that was like now like I never get stuck.
Yeah.
ever. Like I never get stuck because you just get to the same thing, which is like, oh, well, okay, how does this other thing work?
Yeah.
How does that thing work? Okay,
Yeah, he
like,
was good with problem solving and then
Yeah.
helping others problem solve, even in areas that he was unaware of. Because I think he had a very solid game background as far as like working.
That's true. But like, it's really just that mentality, right? Of like, you could figure it out.
Yeah.
Like you just need to like ask the right questions. You need to like reference the right things.
Yeah.
And so
And put in the time.
And put in the time. Right. That's it. So, but I think it's an important like lesson, which is I think a lot of people can get to a spot where they get, like I said, they get frustrated or they don't know how to do something and they go like, well, I don't know how to do it. And some other person does. And so I'm just going to stop. And it's like,
they'll flip the table.
Yeah. And you just like give up. Right. And
Yeah.
I think like it's very easy to find a reason to not do something.
Yeah.
And it's like figuring out like, okay, what can I do next? Like, what's the next step I could take to get me a little bit closer?
Yeah.
And always just be willing to be like, hey, I'm going to try. It might not work out, but I'm going to try. Right?
Yeah, a lot of people fail to mention or fail to see that there's a lot of growth that comes from that because it empowers you. It helps you challenge yourself, and then every time you get a victory, you feel that much more confident. Like you said, you were able to raise your hand and be like, "Throw me in the fire. I'm down to try this." There weren't a lot of people that were doing that, so. But it's one of those things where it's like once you do it and then you become successful at it, you're going to be so much more open to like trying new things, being more successful and so on. So yeah, it's awesome, dude. That's really awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So we are going from Red 5 Studios to Riot Games. You mentioned them earlier. You went from game designer to, I know this is a completely different title, Summoner's Rift Update Lead. What is a Summoner's Rift Update lead?
Yeah. So I don't know how
what do you
familiar
do?
you are.
What does that do?
Were you familiar with League at all?
Yes,
Have you
I played League. I think one of the things they did there is we played League of Legends a lot after hours at Red 5.
That's true. We did. Yeah.
While intoxicated.
So what's interesting is
it was a lot of fun.
There were a bunch of people who were sort of like alums from Red 5 that went.
Yes, that's true. But that was much later though.
No, but it was but there were some, like I said, there's some in that early group that like Tom Cadwell, who's like the VP of design at Riot. Okay. He actually like was a producer at Red 5 during the early years. So there were a handful of people that moved over there from Red 5. But like Justin Hansen's over there now.
Yeah. There's a lot of people over there still.
Capratus and a bunch of people. It's cool. But where was I going with that? So again.
You were going with what is Summoner's Rift Update League? What is that?
Okay.
What is that? That's a very unique title to that company.
Right. So like my actual title, and this is the thing that's like the reason this is on my resume in this way is because I think I want to make sure to paint the right picture. It's like what I was doing, right? Which is that I was sort of like the creative lead on on what we call the maps team at the time. So
and then you were on for the Summoner's Rift map. You were the lead on that map.
That project, yeah. So if you play League of Legends about I don't know whatever year that says, like 2014, I want to say is when we shipped it. Yeah, okay. So 2014, I think the end of 2014, we shipped probably like the biggest update to League of Legends that I can think of it they probably have ever shipped.
Okay.
Which was like we completely redid the map, we redid all the monsters on the map, we did a bunch of the UI elements and a bunch of really great stuff. And I was on this team of like something like 60 of the most talented people I've ever worked with.
Oh, that's a lot of people. I didn't think it was that many people.
It was bonkers, and it was me and like one other like sort of production guy, and I had an art lead that was super talented on that project, and it was just like. We had one other like sort of design person that like was part-time on the project. That was it really. So, but like that was the thing is like that project I had moved into more of like a leadership role more than like sort of get your hands in the guts and make the thing. Yeah. I
noticed that they're good with that, with like helping you level up to become more than what you are.
So I definitely feel like when I joined, there was a phrase that somebody said to me once, and I really liked it and believed in it, and I thought it was like really, it really explained like the emotions of there, which is like, they sort of have you grab the fire hose, like like that's literally like they drop you in the deep end, but it's like the deep end and there's sharks swimming around. I mean, it's like that was the mentality, and so. For me, there were these super talented people that were all around me, and I was just looking around being like, I don't know if I belong here. Like, these people are so good. But all it did is make me want to, like, try really hard, right? Like, I wanted to be as good as they were. my manager was this guy named Joe Tung, who now is like the League of Legends product lead. He had been like the executive producer on Destiny before going to Riot. Just really, really smart guy.
Yeah.
And it's just a great sort of humble leader. And there was just these moments where he would just give me this advice just straight, and that's just like that's how he is. But like he would just instantly level me up because it's like you got like the ding and the spark would go over your head, like those moments, because it's just these things where I would be doing something a certain way and he'd be like, you should just have those other people do that, like ask those people the question instead of you answering, like those little moments and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I would just try the things he would suggest and like be blown away by like how much he knew, how much these other people knew, and how much I could learn. Right?
It sounds like he was teaching you like how to be efficient with time, so you can focus on the things that you really can excel at. Maybe, what do you think you learned in that moment?
I think it was more around like sort of like servant leadership, which is that like when I think when you're younger, you have this mentality that like you need to be the smartest person in the room. Like you actually need to have the answers. Somebody asks you a really hard question, and I think really good leaders are really good at asking really tough questions. The tendency is to want to be like, oh, well, this is the answer. I'm going to like tell you why I'm smart and like why I belong here. Please don't fire me. Like that kind of, what I mean? And what he was sort of teaching me, and it was a bunch of different ways, but I think it was this idea of like surround yourself with people that have those answers. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be smart enough to know that like you have other people who can contribute in that way, and it's also an opportunity to build up those people as leaders, like within your team. So that was one of the things. Is it wasn't like I wasn't trying to be the focus of the conversation, but I was sort of unwittingly doing that, right? Where it's like we'd have a review or something, and I would monopolize like 50-60% of the talking within the meeting, just because like I was trying, trying to justify like, hey, I seriously, I'm doing a good job. Please think I'm doing
belong
a good
here.
job. Right?
I just want to let you guys know. That's hilarious.
Yeah, but I think what I actually started to learn was like, hey, when I throw that question to my art lead instead of answering it, it now like gives him the confidence that I have confidence in him, right, as an art leader. And I think it also like it helps him step up too. So he's growing as well. And then I think it also shows a little bit of humility, right? Because it's sort of like you admitting that there's people who know more than you do about things. And so like that was a big like learning moment for me of like how to be a sort of a stronger leader is just a willingness to be like, okay, these other people, like there's a lot that other people can give you if you let them, and so it's just like trying to find I try to, as much as possible, like ask other people like what they think and try to reflect that stuff back, right? Because I definitely do feel everybody's got opinions. I've got opinions like anybody, but I do think that gaining that as a skill is like a very valuable skill. It's like being able to use the room as a barometer for like how something is going, how something is good or not. Like as an example, like we were doing on this project, we redid a bunch of creatures that like in many cases didn't exist before. We were making.
You talking about the creatures that are in the forest, that are in the jungle area,
like the Grump and
the
Krugs and all that stuff. Like none of that, like the dragon, like just all this stuff is like some of them like we were sort of upgrading, but some of them we were literally like making up out of thin air. And like that's not like when you have a game that's played by as many people as play League, like there was a lot of pressure on us to like to like hit, right, to actually like
to deliver.
But yeah, I definitely think what I started to learn was that like, okay, give people a really good heading and then try to just like as much as possible point back at that, but then let them get creative, let them iterate, like push them to iterate quickly,
Yeah.
but then like let them go. And like there are some moments that I had on that team in particular where like the creatures, like we had a pod of like creatures, which is like animation and VFX and concept and narrative and stuff. Is like this whole little pod of people, and like by the end they were like a powerhouse. They were
That's
crazy. And like all I was doing was just like nudging from time to time, like stepping in and being like, I don't know if this is aggressive enough, or I don't know if this fits in the world quite enough. And that's all I would need to do, because like they were just rock stars. And then they would go in and blow me away over and over and do stuff that I would have never ever imagined we would accomplish. So
that's awesome. It sounds like a lot like the think tank mentality when you have like a little group of people, a pod of people. Was that the first time you mentioned that they did something like that? Because with changing that map and doing those type of things, because if it is, like, I think I still play it now with my wife. I think they've taken that and fostered it, and they keep doing it, man. It's really polished now. Like, each creature has its own personality. Like, I think they've done a good job with doing that.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a bunch of stuff that my sort of production partner on that project, Ben Karsich, there's a lot of things that he like pushed in that team. And like that was one of the things in particular I think was starting to help set up, like, how do we set the team up in such a way that they can move really fast. And so I credit him with a lot of what we accomplished on that project.
That's
for
awesome.
Sure.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, anywhere you go, it's like finding great people to work with, and then just try to work with them as much as you can.
Yeah. And I was going to mention before too, like, all the, surrounding yourself with smart people, asking them questions, that also like fosters communication and team building,
Yeah,
and so it's also really good to ask questions, because I think there's a mentality where before, like earlier in the industry, they would be like, oh, you don't want to ask certain questions because, like you're saying, you want to make sure that you are competent, you are able to either figure out or problem solve on your own before you ask a question. But there is another side where, like, it'll make you faster at what you're trying to accomplish, just trying to utilize your team and, seeing if someone can help you out. It is also worthwhile to explore and try to figure out things on your own. But, yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially with now, I think a lot of things are open floor with how they have seating and stuff, where you can literally just look over and be like, hey, man, I'm doing this right quick. What happens if I do this? And then if I don't do that, what happens? I don't want my scene to crash. I just want to know. I think you know the answer to this.
Right.
And then they'll be like, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, awesome. And you can keep going, as opposed to stopping and then being like, okay, think tank, open up Chrome. Let's see if I can figure out what I need to do, when you could just get the answer and utilize the team. So I like how you explain that.
There was this moment, I don't know, I want to say it was probably early in my Red 5 days, but there's this moment where like somebody communicated this idea to me that's like really resonated with me over the years, which is like usually, and this is not always the case, you might be at some horrible company where you do have a dictator running around yelling at you to do every single thing, but
I was gonna say something, but I stopped myself.
But hopefully it's not like that. And so usually, like, you are the main sort of the decider of how something ends up showing up in the game, like that you worked on, And so I think a lot of people get hung up on this idea of like when having other people contribute ideas or having other people contribute to like the thing you're working on. Like I actually, my favorite people to work with are the ones that like we can go jam on stuff and like we'll just like go and grab a whiteboard and start drawing all over it and acting out animations and like making funny sound effects and like all of that stuff, because like we end up like plussing each other up so that we end up with a result that neither of us could have got to by ourselves, right? But I do think like there is this school, a lot of like more early development, that you hear these stories of these people who are just jerks, who are like in charge of design or in charge of a department or something, and they very much like they rule it like a dictator or something, and I don't think that that's as effective. Like even if those people are brilliant, it still just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't do as well as if you have like a bunch of people all trying to think about how to make the game fun and
that's
look
true.
Good
and without naming names, like it's totally true. Like because when you think of some of the greatest games that have come out it's usually been ruled with that hard thumb of like being a dictator at the helm. But the games are amazing. But that doesn't there's no longevity in that. It's like that was an experience that was created, and it was hard to have that same individual do the next iteration of that experience, But yeah, I mean, you can even say like it's all online. Like God of War. God of War was an amazing game. It was an amazing game, but it was ruled really hard, from what you can read online and what you can find out. Sure. And it's crazy. And that franchise has grown, but it definitely has changed and matured. And then with how the work environment has changed over the years, it's a different approach, with how they've done the latest God of War. So it's crazy. And I think that was a time in game history where people were just making a name for themselves. Like a lot of people I think they were coming out of it as like, yes, I'm working with a team, but I am this. And that's why I like doing what I'm doing here, talking to people that actually do the work, because a lot of times you only hear of like the CEOs, and you only hear the people who are like, they do nothing on making the game, right. They may shake some hands and, smile a lot at the camera, but they can't go and build a level or do animation or do programming or do, a lot of times they don't.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, the other thing too is I guess there's the other side of that, which is like I've worked with some pretty great sort of like visionary leaders.
Yes, but that's a visionary. Yes.
And I think like the ones that are good at that though, they have very strong opinions, like strongly held. Like they are like
and expectations.
This is very like we should do this, we shouldn't do this. But the best ones, like if you give them a counter argument, they will go like, oh, I'm going to consider that and like recompute that problem. And sometimes they're going to come back and be like, no, that's wrong. Like we should actually still do the thing I'm saying. But some of the time they come back and they go like, oh.
Yeah, they're the leaders that listen. They listen. And
I think, but I definitely like, I do think that there is somewhere in between, like somebody who is like that visionary, who is like very hardline, has a belief of what the thing could look like. Like I think that's actually very difficult to do that well. And so I think there is a version of that is good. That like isn't like it's not like, it doesn't have to be like in this evil in the industry, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely think like, that the difference between that being done well and not is usually that listening bit. Right?
Yeah. A lot of times they don't listen. Or they don't want to change because they want the idea to all be their own. They want ownership over the whole thing. So, but because I've experienced that aspect of it, and I've also experienced like giving ideas, having those engaging conversations, like you're saying, like going to a whiteboard and like really boiling down something, and then they're like, you know what? Let me think about it a little bit more. And you're like, and you feel good because even if your idea is not taken completely, because that's one thing you got to learn too, is that once you start speaking, once you open your mouth, it's not yours anymore, and you're sharing it.
That's true.
But what happens is, from sharing that and having this other person now be able to compute it and think about it, like what you mentioned, when it comes back, you can be like, that's awesome. Like, 'cause they may take it to a whole nother level that you weren't thinking about,
right?
Because you're only coming at it from your skill set or from what your thoughts are, and it's like that's really awesome. The only thing about that is that takes up time, and that pushes out milestones. But it's still an important thing that needs to be done. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome, man. So you went from the Summoner's Rift lead to going to live gameplay balance lead. What is that? Like these titles, I have not talked to anybody yet with all I'm doing that has had such unique titles that are specific to the company. So what does a live gameplay balance lead do?
So there's a team on League. I think I imagine it's still there now.
Yeah.
But it's basically like one of the things that I think makes League of Legends exceptional as a game is actually the fact that they update every 2 weeks.
Yeah, they got that down. They got that down to a science. Yeah, man. It's really well done.
It's very impressive, and like the technical, like the technical capability to do that is not something to like sort of shake a finger at. Like, it's very impressive.
And they have not yet, to me being a gamer of the game, they have not broken the game with all the updates they have. They either be like, oh, we notice that people are getting too many points on ranked or getting too many points on whatever matchmaking. So that's turned off, but you can still play the game.
Right.
But they haven't broken the game where it's like, hey, we're down. Like,
no, so like,
you know,
we actually like there was a mandate that like everything you add to the game, there's a switch to turn it off. I mean, like like I say, the way that they've built the game from a technical perspective is very impressive at this point. It wasn't always like that, you know, and there was a bunch of like stumbling and crawling along the way to get to where they were. I mean, I was there when that was sort of that mandate came down from like sort of the top leadership of like, we're going to get to the point where we can do a 2-week patch cadence reliably. And it was tough. I mean, there was a lot of patches where stuff slipped and didn't get into the patch, or we had to push the date by a couple days or whatever. But eventually they got on this rhythm, and it's really impressive. So anyway, I bring that up because so one of the things, there's this team that they own the balance of the game. But the one thing to think about, you know, League is a service. And so the way to think about it is a bit different than, it's not a game like chess or even a game like StarCraft in a way where I think because of the little that like a game like StarCraft changes, like they're not like adding new units every week or something.
Well, it's like the Defense of the Ancients thing, right? Isn't that what it's like?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like that.
It's like that. But like basically like the difference is like a game like, let's say StarCraft, they would do balance patches like once a year after a while, or like very occasionally, right?
Yeah.
And the idea was, the goal was actually like you're trying to make the game perfectly balanced, which is I think still aspirational, but like is more achievable in a game like StarCraft than it is in a game like League, where basically like League is constantly evolving. Like that's the nature of the game. They're going to be adding like new stuff. They actually intentionally shake things up like all the time. So they have this team that the whole point of the team is to make it so that like you can play your champion. You know, there's diversity in the game, that there's that basically the reason that you win or lose a game isn't because you could just go to a list on the internet and read off, I should play, you know, X, Y, or Z character.
Yeah, do these things in this order.
There's actually more depth to the game than that, because like
there's actual teamwork
are working, and like the roles are set up in a way that, you know, they're actually accomplishing a particular sort of slice of the pie. There's a lot of intentionality that goes into that sort of thinking, and like it's incredible actually. Like I learned a lot from the people I worked with on that team, because the amount of thought they would give to a small change, like I'm going to give, you know, Rammus +5 damage to his, you know, W or whatever, right? Like some like very, very minor change, they would give a ton of thought and debate to and discuss amongst one another, and then we would put that in and then play test the hell out of it, and then weeks later would actually make that change and ship it, right? And they were making, you know, 30, 40 of those changes every patch. And so that team, they're like a machine. And like I ran that team for about a year, and it is an intense thing. And there's just so many factors that can go into, like I said, balancing a game like League of Legends, because it's just so complex. But like one of the things we built up while I was there was this, we called it like our balance dashboard, but it was like using a bunch of data to sort of come to conclusions on which projects we should take on, and then how we validated like which projects we actually worked. So if we were trying to like improve the win rate of a character, or like some of the more like nuanced versions of that were like, hey, this character's skill floor is sort of too low or is too high, and so we want to like nudge those around, right? Like that's actually like not obvious, you know, as a sort of design problem. And so I think like there's just a lot of really interesting analysis and sort of critical thinking and problem solving that that we did on that team, and it's really cool. And the one thing I always try to do, like whatever team I'm on, is sort of be pushing the boundaries of like what we can do. So we try to take on some projects that were like outside of the realm, and some of them led to like, you know, these moments where we broke the game in some way or another. But like some of those moments are some of the most memorable, and that's sort of gotten, you know, helped me articulate like when I think about like what my design values as a game designer are. I think a lot of them came out of various experiences. One of them was on that team where you know, we made a change and it has this cascading effect where it totally breaks the meta. It screws up all this stuff. But the stories you heard from that, sure, there were some people that were flaming us on the forums and like making YouTube videos where they were very upset. But there was also these other people who like you could hear like their thinking about the game and like their deep interest in sort of solving a new puzzle, and that was just super cool. And so like I always sort of tell people like the reason I make games is because I want to be like sort of creating memories for people, right? It's like you want to have these stories that they're going to tell for like years and years and years, and it's like sometimes actually making a rough edge in a game, like breaking things a little bit, is like how you generate those stories. And so I think people are sometimes a little bit too scared to like sort of sometimes make people upset, because sometimes, like I said, because sometimes that actually can create an emotion, and that emotional response is like actually a lot of times what's going to create the fun or those memories.
Yeah, I think with what they've done numerous times is when they put out a new champ. That champ is so OP, but what they're doing is like they're making you go, I want to play this character.
Sure,
I'm really powerful, and then they nerf it. But then I think what people seem to forget over time is that, hey, it's going to be okay. Even though they're going to nerf it, it's going to be okay. But those people who were like, but I was so strong, they're the ones that have to get over that hump of like, oh, it's not good now. When it is good, it's just, it's going to be all right, man. They've brought in hundreds of characters. They've nerfed hundreds of characters. And the game is still fun, and it's still okay. But it's one of those things I think people forget. Every time a new champ comes out, they think it's going to be perfect right off the bat. And it's the same thing. It's always the same thing. Everyone will start playing it. It'll get into that rotation of being free for that week or whatever, and then you're OP when you play it, and you feel good. You're like, yes, we're winning games. And you get knocked back down to bronze, and then you're like, "Wow, they nerfed it. I can't win anymore." You know. So, but it's pretty cool. I think that's really cool. So when you're talking about the live portion of gameplay balance, are you talking about you guys? You weren't manually. I don't believe you could manually go in and take. I think they maybe had 70 characters at the time, or not even 100 yet when you were on the team.
They probably had. We were about 100.
And so you're not changing those manually, right? Like, I mean, it had to have been something where, like, because you said there's a chart. I would think if you change the slider on Ramis, and I'm looking at it as like, when you play those football football manager games where you're like, I'm gonna change this stat, and then everything changes.
That's
like,
exactly what it's
is
like.
that what it's
That's
like?
exactly
Okay,
what it's
so
like.
each character, I'm just envisioning like each character's in a bucket. You change something here, and it you get like these little crit damage points or whatever on everybody else that's a selectable character, and how they react to the change you made for the one character, like of Ash. Her arrows do this now, and now everybody's like, oh, this character may not get affected. This character gets affected a lot, and blah blah blah. But it's all automatic. I feel. I mean, I can't believe you guys.
No, it's manually. Not. It's all manual. That's,
oh God.
That's the thing. That's what I was saying.
That's
like
crazy. That's a lot.
The people who there were a couple guys I worked with that they had been on that team for like a couple years before I had joined, and like the way that they thought about the characters in the game was just very it was incredible. Like you'd have somebody who had like such deep understanding about a particular champion, and you'd go like, okay, well, if we have a question about like karma, like I'm going to go talk to this person. Yeah. Like they know more about karma than anybody in the company. You know? And it was that sort of really like sort of impressive understanding. But no, it's exactly like what you're talking about is like one of the things like when I was saying we were talking about how to approach which projects to select is like I was trying to do a lot of that sort of like strategic level thinking about how to approach balance.
When you say projects, are you talking about which champ?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I'm like.
It could be items.
Like,
it could be runes, right?
Okay,
like now,
gotcha.
like they have like the rune system and whatnot. Like it could be like any. It could be like even things within the game. So it might be like dragon or or the buff that red gives you when you kill the monster. It's like all of that stuff.
You've seen what it does now, though, right? Have you been playing League Legends?
I haven't played. Sorry, I'm not going to be like totally ignorant to say like I haven't played League in about the last 9 months or something. So
dude, it changes the map now. But go on. Let's go. Let's finish your thought.
I did see that. So that's really cool.
That's pretty crazy.
It's really cool. It's really exciting. Like there was something like that we talked about for years wanting to do, and like it's super cool to see some stuff. It
reinvigorates the game. It makes you go like because it changes the map. It changes where you can path everything. But let's continue talking about it.
That's awesome. But no, it's just the thing you're talking about is true, which is like, let's say if you make a character who is very strong in a particular way, like weaker at that thing, it has like any character that has any relationship with that character. So like you might be like, okay, I nerf a particular ADC. There's going to be certain supports that are better with that ADC. By nerfing them, you're actually kind of nerfing all the supports at the same time. And it might not be at the magnitude of the main character you're touching, right? But like it affects all of them. But then you're also doing the reverse, which is like all of those supports and that ADC, all the characters that fight against them and with them are also getting adjusted. So it's like this, it's sort of like you're throwing a pebble in a pond and like there's this ripple effects.
Yeah.
That's every change you make. And so what we sort of found over time, and like it's sort of been one of my guiding lights, is that you should do lots of very little changes. Yeah. Because if you use that like analogy with like a pond, if you throw in a big rock, it actually creates waves. Yeah. And it's very hard to predict what's going to shake out of that. If you throw like a handful of sand, it doesn't really do much to the state
but you
of
added
the water.
A lot. Yeah.
But like it will make you kind of in the case of like a game like League, it sometimes will make you question the relationships of a lot of things. And what I've always sort of contended is that League is the most fun when you're experimenting.
Right.
When you believe that, like, you have hope in your heart that the champion you're playing might be overpowered, or that that this particular strategy you want to try might really pay off, right? Like you always want to feel like there's that possibility of that. And like when that's true, League is so fun to play.
Yeah.
And when it's not, when it feels sort of stale and solved, it's not very fun to play. And so by sort of taking this approach where you're affecting lots of things a little bit, I think that's part of the reason they've been able to foster like this sort of, the game is very fun to play week after week after week.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, because the game is changing and it's making you go like, okay, like which puzzle am I going to try to solve, in this game?
Yeah.
So.
You made me think about a thought that I thought about saying or not saying, but I'm gonna say it. It is kind of like chess. It's almost like a real time battle chess, if you think about it. Because I mean, if you imagine the characters, imagine someone picked a pawn, a bishop, a rook, and maybe the queen to play. You know what their moves are in chess. They can only move in certain patterns and stuff. But imagine if it was like real-time battle chess where like you don't have to wait. You got your bishop like swooping in and like doing some damage. Listening to you talk made me think like it can be like that. And I never thought about it as like a chess game, but I have played matches where you look like you're gonna lose. You don't have the highest amount of kills like team wide, and I'm glad they don't have like a countdown timer where the game just ends. But if you can last and get your build, your build that works, and your other team is building themselves up, no one's giving up, everybody's pushing through, you can still win in your match, which is insane. And I think a lot of it goes to the other team not knowing how they're feeling, but a lot of times when you see after the game is done and what people are talking about, they're frustrated. They were yelling at each other. They were arguing.
Yeah, sure.
And so those matrix that they have when they give you those little pop-ups of saying like, 66% of games that win or whatever is because people are being positive and actually helping out each other. It matters. And I think for me, that's what makes it fun, because early on playing that game, I was just, I don't think I knew what I was doing. I mean, I was one of those guys who bought 2 boots. So I was like, yes, I want more speed. And I didn't understand it didn't stack.
You got to put them on your hands.
I didn't know it didn't stack, right? And I didn't read into the game. I just played it at face value.
Sure.
So, but now like, it's changed a lot. But now when I play, like, my wife is actually way better than I am at it. But I have my moments where I can do like a 10-win streak, and like she's like, "Oh my God, why don't you play that all the time? What's going on?" I was like, I'm just focused. I don't have anything on my second monitor. I'm just focused on the game, And so it's crazy. And like you get those moments where you'll feel like, oh, it's getting repetitive. I'm buying the same build. I'm doing the same thing. But I think there's understanding that I'm noticing is that when you play the game, and if you can build situational based on who your other enemies are and how they're playing, that's what makes it kind of fun, because you're like, it's not the same thing. You shouldn't go into it building the exact same build every time. And that's what I think that's where it's on a different level of playing.
I think that there is like this fail case. Like we actually encountered that when I was on that team at a couple different times, where if the game started to fall into this lull where it felt like the same tactics and strategies, like you could swap the characters a little bit, but generally you were seeing the same stuff over and over, that like the thing you just said is like starts being true, where you don't come to the game and there's not like this like opportunity to sort of build new skill and new mastery, then the game loses a lot of like what's fun about it. Like the wanting to learn and get better and figure out like, how can I do this thing in a a slightly better way, or fight that character a little bit better, or whatever it is, like try a different build, like any of those sort of types of things. The second that those stop being true, then like the game, it dries up a lot.
But that's when I go like, okay, well, what other champs fall in the bucket of how I like to play? And then you'll get a whole new champ, whole new way of clicking and doing their abilities. You don't just press the buttons. Even I'm noticing. I mean, I was told recently that you can change it, but I'm noticing, like, I played Warwick recently, and like you have to have your mouse hovering over them before you press your buttons for it to activate. You can't just press it. It's crazy. And I'm like, at first I was like, why am I dying? I'm strong. Like, what's going on? So you learn new mechanics, you learn new ways of playing, and it makes it feel like the game is new. But I was told that if you go into the settings, you can actually nerf it and make it where like every time a skill shot is done, it's done this way, and you can make it where it's easier to play. But
normal cast on for everything, and you can turn quick cast on.
But they said there's a risk for that. They were saying like one guy who plays a lot, he was telling me like if you do that, it may not be as accurate because you're trying to go for speed of being like, I see somebody coming, boom, I can just go right into it instead of like dragging my mouse and then doing it.
Well, I'd say because it's an extra click some of the time. So
that's a different style of playing.
There are some characters that like I play quick cast and some that I played normal cast, because there are cases where like actually losing that like fraction of a second is enough of a reason that like you may or not win a team fight or something. So
that's interesting. I haven't gotten to that level yet of wanting to customize anything. I find it fun to just what's new about this character? All right, I want to try to learn this character. So,
I definitely think that's a strength of that game. It's interesting. One of the things when you were, early on in that conversation, one thing I was sort of drawn to when you were comparing it to chess is I was curious, like, have you played any of like the auto battler games that have come out, like
for League?
Well, that's actually one of them, right? Is they have Teamfight Tactics, which is great, but like
there's also tried that. I have not tried that.
Auto chess, and Hearthstone has one out now called Battlegrounds, but it's just interesting. Like it might be worth checking out, because I would say like that they are leaning into this idea of like, if you think of like the Dota style games of like League of Legends or whatnot as being like the evolution of RTSs, where hey, controlling units is actually like fairly complex, like mechanically, but if you controlled one unit and like that's what it moved to, it's like you no longer have to worry about like really controlling anything except for your one guy. This next like sort of wrinkle on that, or like evolution maybe of that genre, is these like auto battlers, and it's very much like the first one was called Auto Chess, literally is Dota Auto Chess, but the units, they have a very simple behavior, and periodically and some of them, like in Auto Chess, they periodically cast an ability. And so all you do is you place them on the board and you level them up and whatnot. But then like once they're on the board, they just fight automatically. You don't control them at all.
See, I might have to check it out now that you're explaining it. I haven't been drawn to it. I've seen it on there, the TFT or whatever, and I'm just like, But the way you're explaining it, maybe they need to make a video or something. They need to make something. They need to make something where it's like, it pulls me in a little bit more, because when I see it, I'm just like, that doesn't interest me right now. I don't know why.
There are a lot of one thing so I'm a parent now, and so I found that like my hours of like PC games, like that's why I was like talking like haven't played a lot of League in a while. It's like it's just hard to find a couple hours to sit down and play League.
Midnight to 5 a.m. works best for that.
That I am with you. I understand. But I found myself playing a lot of mobile games. Part of the reason I sort of have found myself working on a mobile game, but one thing that's been great was like a lot of the auto battler games they've put on mobile, and they're, I think, 100% as good as they are in their PC form, because you don't control the units, like you're just placing them and making sort of strategic choices. So it lends really, really well to that platform. So I don't know, it's interesting. But if you haven't checked them out, that might be the thing where like, hey, if you're sitting around waiting for something to do, or you're watching TV at night, like it's one of those games. Great, you can play it in that sort of environment.
I didn't know that was like that. I mean, I play a lot of mobile too, but I like match 3 type games.
Oh, interesting.
Where the one I'm playing now is Gems of War. It's pretty cool. I'm not fond of the match games where you just are mindlessly breaking things by matching things and getting points. Like this one,
there's like a meta game or something.
Yes, that's cool. Very high. And I do a lot of the PvP and guild type stuff in it. So I played just enough to understand how to make up a team, and then how the team can complement one another, and then how to get the biggest breaks. Instead of it being 3, I'm doing like 5, 7, combos, and it's turn based, and it's not timed. You can take as much time as you want. I'm noticing in this game, but you get an opportunity to think about what your move is going to do, and then like chess, because I really like playing chess. You can think and go, well, if I do this, it does this, and that'll happen. The only thing you don't know is what's going to fall down after you break stuff. That's where it becomes like kind of random and exciting. But if you can see what's on the board and make a particular move that's going to do a chain reaction once on the board, anything that falls could either be really good or could be just enough where you're like Connect Four, you're blocking it where they can't do something to hurt you. I really think they did a good job with this game on that. And like, nice. And I know I'm thinking about it. I had another conversation. I'm thinking about this way too deep because it's a match 3 game, but that is what my time waster is when I'm laying in bed or if I'm doing whatever. It's really fun, and it's not overly. Because I used to play Clash Royale, but it's not, and the only reason why I don't play it is because I lost my account and it wasn't connected to my Google Play. Oh. And I wasted money in that game because I couldn't get it back. So I was like, no more. I'm not doing that no more. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I go through a lot of match 3 games, but I haven't spent any money. I consider myself a whale when it comes to mobile games. I will spend some money on a game because I spend it because I'm having fun. Yeah. But in this game, my wife takes a different approach. She's like, I don't spend any money. So we're playing one of these games together, and she just overshadows me big time. She doesn't spend when you get the coins or you get the things that you can just spend and get a new champ or whatever. She saves everything. She doesn't spend anything. Mm-hmm. And so she saves everything to the point where she has 1,000 of these things that when you start getting that many, it's important. It changes the game because now instead of her just taking the 1 coin and doing a roll and being like, oh, I'm going to get a hero, she can do 5 to 10 to 15, 20 rolls, and then she's getting the rare and the ultra rare because it's like she's going through those gates that they put up on the back end. They'll be like, they want you to spend money. Yep. So I'm trying to incorporate that into how I play this game. And, dude, I don't even need to play the game. This is what I think. This is a mechanic that they need to think about. I don't even play the game anymore. Like I haven't even opened up any more of the map. The map is huge, where you get kingdoms and stuff. You can go fight more stuff. I don't even do that anymore. I'm so high with how much gold I have and how many orbs and coins that I have that I'm just like, I go into PvP and I'm dominating in PvP, and I'm leveling up in PvP instead of leveling up in the offline game. It's awesome, dude. Just check it out if you like. So, but this is about you. Sorry.
Man, it's cool.
We're talking about games, so I got a little bit.
No, it's cool.
So that's awesome, dude. There's a lot of things I don't think I knew from Riot, and I knew you were excited when you went there. I knew you were excited when you moved and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but,
that was great.
That's pretty awesome.
That's why it's weird. So you'll see that I left.
And you went back, I think, right?
I went back. Yeah, so we'll get there. But
lucky man.
But yeah, it was cool.
So you went from Riot Games to senior game designer at Blizzard. You went back to Blizzard. So was that like a homecoming thing for you? Like, was it like, oh my God, I'm here again?
So that's what drew me there for sure. Okay. It was kind of a weird thing. So when I was younger, when I was like in college, I had applied to be on the balance team for StarCraft 2. I didn't get it, and I got really nervous in the interview, and I think I was just like totally not answering questions well, and so I just totally bombed it, I think. Wait,
let's go back there. So how is the interview for that? How does that go? Like a lot of people are trying to figure out. I had one person on here that was like, you get a whiteboard, you got to solve these problems on the spot as a programmer, and it's crazy. Like how does the interview go for design? Yeah.
So I think it differs based on like who you're talking to. I think like the better interviews are ones where you have a discussion about a topic that's testing you on your sort of a bunch of different skills around like creative thinking, problem solving, creativity, like that sort of thing. Like one of the tests at Riot is around like designing a champion sort of from scratch, and like the people giving the interview like sort of drive down the path of like, okay, what's the fantasy of the character, and then like what, so it sort of walks down that step. And I think but that's like one type of question, right? But one of the things that you encounter a lot when you are applying for design jobs is that you often do these design tests, and they usually, from what I've always seen, people tend to like overly emphasize the game that the person would be working on, rather than like sort of generalist design skill.
Okay.
And so, the example would be like, oh, you're going to work on a shooter. And so they ask you all sorts of questions about shooters. And while that is good, like you should ask a bunch of questions about shooters, they sometimes will like leave off like more like not specific. Like they might be like, tell me something about like Quake 3, like very specific, like zoom in question. And it's like, like how they answer that question really doesn't show you if they're a good designer or not.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a stupid question. Like design tests are like, I think one of the things that it's very easy to do very poorly. But anyway, so yeah, I think if I was going to encourage anybody to like, how do you prepare? One of the better exercises that somebody shared with me when I was at Riot, actually, that he encourages like more sort of associate level designers to do, is to give yourself a problem to solve that's going to like challenge your like some of those skills. So one of the examples that he used was like, take a champion and puts them into a different role. So if you're like, make Sona into an ADC,
right,
and like walk through like how would you do that?
You mean while keeping all her stuff the same, or you mean like just take the liberty to change it? And how would you change it?
Like just answer the question of like, how would you make her an ADC? Which is like, I think some of the things you just ran into were some of the problems you immediately start to hit, right? Where you go like, okay, well, what's her identity? How do I keep as much of that identity as possible while still making her into this other role? And like, are there skills that if you changed, people would be like, well, now it's not Sona anymore? That's like a legitimate thing to think about, right? It's like, what could you do to the skills that you keep the sort of the heart, the core of the idea, but you still change it so that it fits in this other role? Like walking through those sorts of like problems and thinking through like, hey, I came up with 3 or 4 different answers to that problem. Like, oh, I think like Sona's Q is super important to her identity. So like an AoE stun is the thing. It's like, but like, can you have an AoE stun on an ADC? And you could think through like, okay, well, does anybody do anything like that? And you might be like, oh, like Varus has something like that, right? So you're like, okay, maybe there is a version, but again, like it's walking down that problem set and thinking like, okay, what's something similar? And then you might get to that thing that I just got to is like, oh, Varus is like this. But then you're like, oh, well, if I literally do something that's just like Varus, how do I make sure it's not the same as Varus? Like, how do I keep it unique to Varus? Like, it's literally just like going through that exercise. And every time you run into one of those, like, is this a problem? Is this a thing that I should do? Like, how could I do this thing better? Whatever the sort of stopping point, it encourages you to really deeply think about that problem set. And I think it's a really powerful exercise. And I mean, you can do that in a bunch of different contexts, right? Like, if you were to take like your, that just the idea of like changing the role of something to something else is like a really good.
It's pretty cool
way to think about things. Like you could do the same thing with like a WoW character if you wanted to, or like from an RPG or.
It seems like that can open up areas for you for that character of how it is now and how you can even make it stronger. Because you're kind of breaking it, and you're like, man, why doesn't she have anything that can go against X or whatever? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's pretty neat. And the other thing is that like that particular example was cool in the context of League is that it also it helps you understand like what the category means as well. So like if you're talking about let's use like WoW examples or something. If you were to say like, hey, like take this this fighter like sort of character like a warrior, and then you want to make them more like a rogue, like understanding like what a warrior is, understanding what a rogue is, and like what are the things that are like off limits for those, and like what are the things that are like cool, like that's very like archetypal, like what are the reference points you could have that might make you go like, okay, cool, like if I wanted to do that, these are the types of things I might consider. And as you do that, you gain this understanding of like the category. Then that's really powerful as well. So
Yeah, it's like I think correct me if I'm wrong. It's like you could do a priest, a full-on priest in World of Warcraft, or you can do a full-on tank. There's that one class that's like a priesty tank.
A paladin.
Yeah, paladin. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. It's like that, right? Where you take two, kind of put them together.
Yeah,
and then,
right. So,
yeah.
but you might think about, like there's a very like early on, and maybe somebody is like design thinking, they might ask a question that like, like, why doesn't this character do this other thing? Like what, if you think of like WoW, you might be like, why can't a priest use two-handed swords? Like why not? Like that would be cool. Like I would love to be a priest that could walk around and slash people with swords. But the thing that you start to like get to very quickly is like, yeah, but if you do that, that makes the characters that do that as their specialty less special.
Yeah,
and
so
so
you're
like,
no longer a priest at that point,
right? And so it's both things, right?
Yeah.
It's both like you make like the priest is less like what you expect a priest to do,
Yeah.
and the characters that what you expect them to do is be like the big warrior type characters. Like now all of a sudden, like everybody's doing the thing that they are special at. They're all of a sudden kind of generic because so. Yeah, there's a lot of like sort of interesting thoughts you can do when you just like dig into. It's like challenging yourself with sort of these design problems to like sort of just think about.
Yeah, there's a new game, GTFO. I started playing. It's pretty fun, and I think they're doing exactly what you're talking about, where they're abandoning the class, where you start as a class, and you can build your loadout however you want.
That's cool.
Everyone has access to all the loadout options, but you need the team to be diverse because it's a 4-player co-op.
Oh, okay.
So you need everyone to kind of be different, but you can all be the same. But it will make it more difficult, or So that's pretty cool. I think if this is successful, because it just came out like a couple days ago, I think if that's successful, it could actually change how things are, because you're no longer limiting people to a class and saying you can only wear the green things, you can only wear the purple things, you can only wear you can now say like you can mix and match it however you want. And I think what that does is it offers up more replayability, because you now can, much like in League or WoW, when you can build your armor set for a particular mode of play that you're going to play that night, you can go, well, I would like a pistol, a shotgun turret, and some kind of crazy melee. Or I can be like, I want a long range rifle. I want a heavy machine gun. Like you can put whatever you want in those slots. And
you
now
played like Path of Exile. I'm just curious.
I have played that before with someone, but that's a little different than isometric. That's the isometric game, right?
Oh, it's like a Diablo sort of style. Like they have
this one's first person.
They have a very interesting skill tree sort of system where you can customize in pretty elaborate ways.
See, this one's not a tree though. That's the thing. Like it's like you get 4 slots, and then when you click on the slot, here's all your options. Put whatever you want in there from this box and so on. And so that's why it's kind of different. It's almost like Alien Swarm a little bit. Did you play that at all? That's on Steam, but it's like Alien Swarm a little bit. But it's in Alien Swarm, someone had to be a technician, someone had to be a gunner, someone had to be a healer, and so on. So you were in these classes.
I think I've seen that game.
But in GTFO, you can be whatever. Like when the health pack, you find the health packs in the world. And so you can hold onto a health pack, and that's one of your utilities. Or you can be like, I'm going to take my tool set, because if I drop down my turret, I can fix my turret. You don't have to be like, engineer, get over here, fix this turret.
Right.
It's pretty cool. It's different.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's different. So, but
I think a system like that would almost require you to have some pretty significant trade-offs, and I think having a limited number of slots helps a lot with that, actually.
Yeah, you can only carry certain things, or a certain amount of things.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool. So, senior game designer. That's awesome, dude. And you went, okay, so now you go back to Riot. You went back to Riot, map and modes lead. Now, totally different title. Once again. Map to Mosley. Okay, so I play what League of Legends or what Riot puts out. So is this when you guys were doing like the other maps like Twisted Tree and ARAM and stuff like that? Is that when all these things started to come online? Type of stuff?
So like while I was working on the update to SR, there was this like sort of like small scrappy side team, and they started making game modes. So like they made Legend of the Poro King and
Oh, you mean like those weekend type things?
yeah,
I remember those.
So
Was
they made a bunch
happening.
of, at the time they called them featured game modes, and that little like scrappy team, like they did a bunch of really cool modes, and what they eventually landed on was like, hey, we really like having these modes. They're not a thing you'd want to like leave up indefinitely. Like making them special is part of like why that's compelling. Like if it was on all
Seasonal,
the time,
holiday
then
type
people
stuff.
get bored. So if you look at like Twisted Tree Line, for example, or Dominion
And
was
they
another
took that
one,
away.
is that they actually had to like we had to turn them off, but because they actually had like such low play rates. But every time we would change things, it would cause bugs and crashes and all sorts of stuff that we'd have to fix. But like nobody was playing. I don't want to say nobody, but very small population of people were playing. We had a diehard group of people, but it was pretty small compared to the rest of the game. And when we were looking at like, okay, we want to make new content, new maps, new modes, whatever, it was like, okay, we're spending, let's say, a week out of every 2 weeks just fixing these bugs, right? And so at some point we decided to just like shut those down. But anyway, that team, they started working on these side game modes, and instead, if you just turn them on for 2 weeks at a time, then you can build them in such a way that they're a little bit more like they're more easy to support, right? Because you could make sure that they're bug fixed and everything for that release. It's on for the 2 weeks, and then when the patch comes out, it goes away.
Yeah,
and so
it's a good way of testing features too.
Yeah, that's true. So that was like a thing, and when I went back to Riot, that was like one of the teams that they needed somebody to go like sort of like lead that team that was doing game modes. And the thing is like at the same time there was sort of this other side initiative that was happening on the other half of the game. It makes like skins and stuff. There's this idea of like, well, we'd really like to we have these thematics. So rather than doing, hey, I'm just going to have, some random hodgepodge of skins, like, no, we're going to have like Halloween. We're going to make Halloween skins, or like Star Guardians are going to be just Star Guardians. And what we noticed was like that group, those are very popular with players. Like they would sell really well, and they resonate a lot with players, and people like were really into it. So when I joined that team, I did a lot of like sort of searching around, like, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could shift like how you think about these modes to being much more like events. And I partnered with another sort of product leader on the dev team, and we sort of fostered that within the like one of the initiatives. Like there's these big initiatives on League of Legends, and like one of the initiatives we like built out the ability to make events as a thing. And the sort of the cornerstone piece of that was these game modes. And the whole idea is like I got really into this idea of sort of making end-to-end products. So you think of it like in the past they would have made a mode. It looks like Summoner's Rift, and the rules are a little bit different. But like other than that, like it's just a different spin on what you're already used to.
Yeah.
I wanted to be like, no. Like let's fundamentally make new games in League of Legends, and I want them to have like custom music and like brand new maps and like a totally different core experience that when you go, it's like, hey, like we're going to do bold stuff. Like some people might not like it. Like some people are like, hey, I'd rather just go play ranked. And I was always like, cool, then go play ranked. Right. But for like a subset, it's like, we're going to entertain you. Right. Like we're going to have something cool that you can be excited that like new stuff is showing up in League. So we made a handful, like we made, this sort of mini game called Dark Star Singularity, which is sort of like this sort of our version of Hook Wars, which is like an old custom game where you can like pull units across the map, and it's kind of bonkers.
Like what Urgot does anyway, right?
It's sort of like that, yeah. Like Thresh was like the main character of it, actually. But with the hook, like literally, it was like Thresh mode, right? We made a couple different modes that were PvP, but like I said, they were like these mini games, like Mario Party or something. In League of Legends. But all of them had themes and music, and they were cool. They were.
Do the same ones? I mean, my wife would tell me about them. Are the same ones? Like I think you guys took. What's the guy's name that throws the bombs? The little rat-looking dude.
Oh, Ziggs.
Yeah, Zig. Like everyone, you get unlimited. Everybody gets the same character. Is one version that I think you guys had out, and then everybody gets unlimited mana.
Yeah, one for all was
And
cool.
then once you have unlimited mana, you could just. She said that's just bonkers. Like that's just
So
crazy
Earth.
game.
So that was one of the things interesting. So there were some of these modes that were made, like I said, before I joined the team. One of them was this mode, Ultra Rapid Fire,
Okay.
which is like the most sort of most successful game mode that team has ever made, I believe, by almost any metric. It's like it's crazy popular. Like when we would turn it on, like more people would play that than would play ranked or normal or anything. Like it was just crazy popular.
Yeah.
Super fun. One of the things that was it's cool about it is that like the sort of the skill cap is higher on that mode than the normal mode because you can push buttons faster and you have unlimited mana, so you can just spam stuff and it's bonkers. Some of the characters, like they weren't meant to have that sort of twitch. Like they already are a high twitch character, and then you're like, what if we made it, like 5x that? Oh my god!
It's like everybody's playing on God mode when you do that,
sort of,
and you're like, oh, it's crazy.
But one of the things that's cool, one of the things I always thought was really fun about it was that mode in particular. Right from the first second of the game you're playing, like you immediately walk out before minions spawn or anything, and you're throwing bombs at each other and like whatever, because like you have unlimited mana, you don't have to worry about that. So like. You just are immediately fighting. Like that's always been like one thing. It's cool to jump right into the action. So, but yeah. So there's a bunch of different modes. And so after we, one of the things that I was trying to do on that team was sort of build out the capabilities of the team. We were this tiny little team of like 10 people, but we were like making games. Like it just
awesome.
happened to be within League. And when we first started, like I had worked on Summoner's Rift, and I had a couple of the artists that had worked on that with me on that team with on this maps team. And the idea of doing new maps was like pretty scary because like that project had been like a 19-month project. It was 60 people. Like it was this whole thing. So this idea of like, let's make a new map, and I've got like 4 people to work on it was like, this is insane. Like this is bonkers. But like all the credit to them, like we started small and we just like tried to build what we could and be as scrappy as possible. And over the next year or so, like they built up the muscle so that like we eventually made the first PvE mode that had ever been made, which was actually like a multi-room sort of like Diablo-esque style game that was based on the Star Guardian thematic, and people really liked that a lot. And so then like the last project I actually worked on after like another handful of smaller modes, the next like big project, like the last thing was this Odyssey mode where we actually had like progression, and it was like a PvE mode, but it was still limited to a small subset of characters. But it was the same thing of like, hey, like we're gonna keep building it out. That's and cool. It was actually really cool to like after that was like the last thing I worked on, and then like about I don't know, like it was like 8 months later or something, they shipped TFT, and it was like largely that team, and I was super like proud of them to like see that like it was this building block thing, and when they finally like sort of Voltroned in the right way, like they made the coolest thing they've made to date, and it's been super successful and stuff. So, and it's like it's cool to like look back and see a bunch of people I worked with like being core to that and being like, oh yeah, you guys are rock stars. So
that's pretty cool.
It's awesome.
That's awesome, dude. So 2 years and 5 months. Wait, we went. I think we skipped the date. You went back and you did a certification Scrum in 2013.
Yeah.
Rocket 9 Solutions Scrum Alliance. What was this? What is Scrum? What is Scrum? Yes.
So part of that was that like I had heard. Well, so I'll answer your question first, and then I'll explore why I did it. So Scrum, it's just sort of like a work system. There's like an umbrella to that, which most people describe as like agile like methodology. But basically the idea is working on like sort of smaller teams where you have like cross functionality. You'll have a bunch of experts at different disciplines, and you just like throw them at a problem, and they iterate on that problem until they solve it. And the thing with Scrum in particular is you're trying to have sort of like constant delivery. So rather than maybe like a more traditional style of development, you might be like, cool, we have a 6-month milestone that we're going to work towards, and you have producers that will make Gantt charts and figure out like, okay, we have to do this stuff in this order, and you're always wrong 100% of the time, but they always like work towards that, right? As best you can. And Scrum instead is like, okay, what are the highest priority things? Let's aim at those things, and we're going to do a short iteration of a week or 2 weeks or something. And we're going to work towards solving those problems. And then we'll, at the end of that cycle, we'll reevaluate and see what's the next group of problems that are at the top of the list. We'll tackle those. And you just constantly do that and do that and do that until you feel like the thing is good enough to ship, or you run out of time, which it's always a balance between those things, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically just like sort of an approach to work. There's a bunch of people who could probably do a much better job of explaining it than I just did, but yeah. But so that's the gist of it.
So what was this? So what was the certification like? Was it a? It was a what? I don't know. Is that a year? Or was that a few months? Or
it was just I think it was a couple weeks.
So was it a test? Class. Did you go take a class and then you had to just show
it was
how
like
competent you are?
day,
Okay.
I want to say it was like a week or two. It wasn't like crazy long or anything. But the thing about it was that I had just heard of that like idea.
Well, it popped onto the scene into the gaming industry. I think it was from another field, but then it got adopted
I think it's
to
more general tech is like where it came from.
So then it got adopted to the game industry, and then everyone was using it. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things where it's like, I think, programs like this probably came up just like how you can get Microsoft certified.
Yep.
And, it probably just promotes you more when you can put on your resume and talk to people and be like, oh yeah, I know how to do Scrum. You're like, whoa, we're starting to use Scrum. Can you help us?
So that was the thing that I like. The reason that like I did that at the time was that there were a handful of jobs that like they mentioned that in their job posting.
Yeah, what they're looking for.
Specifically, like that's the thing that they valued.
Okay.
And so at the time, I want to say it was like $1,000 or something. But I was looking for like, positions in the industry or whatever. And so I was just looking for like, okay, that's not that crazy of a price to like make myself a little bit more marketable. So
here's the question is, do you feel, because I think that's important for people to know that probably are in school or probably have an opportunity to do things like this. Do you feel like going outside of work and being like, I want to get certified in this, was it beneficial?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, I think that's totally worth doing. So the super high level version of that is like, if you're not continuing to like learn and grow and improve, pick a different industry or something, like
you will be dated soon.
You will be dated soon. No, I mean, that's the biggest thing is like, I think one of the things that, if you said you wanted to make games, like I would say like one of the best, I don't even want to say talent, because it's more like things that you enjoy, like it's like likes, is learning. Because if you enjoy like learning things, like it's a pretty good industry, because there's always some like update to something that you need to learn and figure out, and go on YouTube and try to figure out, or go on Google and do a bunch of searches and find some nice forum somewhere where people are explaining how the hell to do that thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think there's a lot of different opportunities to learn things. I mean, like now especially is like, I did a handful of like about a year ago, I did like 3 different Udemy classes that were all like,
oh nice, yeah,
$13.
Yeah. And
like I learned Unity. I did like a C++ one for Unreal, and it's just like, it's crazy. Like you can go for like $13 and have like these like college level, like some of the best courses I've ever taken in my life, and they're like $13. And it's like, it's insane.
Yeah, the online schooling is really blowing up right now.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And like there was nothing like that when I was coming up. So like now it's like insane. Like there's so much fun too. Like that was what I was enjoying. It's like there's these classes you can take where they're like, just make a bunch of like your own like really simplistic games, but like you just follow along, and like at the end of it you're like, hey, I made like 7 or 8 games that like I've been like noodling around with. And then the coolest version of that is then being able to take those and being like, well, what if I try to add, like, I didn't have a health bar. Let's see if I could figure out how to add a health bar to this, and like have no idea what I'm doing. And like, you cobble something together that kind of works, and you're like, I'm a god because I've just built this thing out of nothing. And it's like, it's so cool. So I definitely think that there's a lot of fun to that, but seeking that out is really, you got to do that.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. So let's go back. So Maps and Mosley, you went from Maps and Mosley to where you are now.
Yeah.
So what we didn't do that I like to do is do like a retrospective. I like to earlier when I was doing interviews with people, it would be like on every position change of like in retrospect. So now that we've already gone through what you've accomplished, where you are now, what are some of the things when you think back that, you know, it's not about changing your past, but it's about helping to inform people who may be in the early years where they're not working yet. Maybe they still have opportunity to take a class or change their mind on something to better themselves for success. What are some of the things that you can think back and go, if you're looking at going into design, you've done like combat, level, world, you've done almost all aspects of design. What are some of the things that you would let the enthusiast, the student, or the person looking to get into design, what would you let them know? What should they do? How should they be preparing? Like, this is probably a long question, but and we can answer it and talk about it in different ways. But what are some of the things, if you look back at what you've learned, if you had X, would it have been better? If you did that certification earlier, would it have been better? Would you, if you've done more certifications, would it be better? Like stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's a long. That's a lot in that question. That's a chunky one. But we can start to chip at it because
that's good.
I think it's important because a lot of times what I'm seeing is I'm getting feedback from these videos of people being like, "Oh my God, you've inspired me to continue doing what I'm doing. This is so awesome. I haven't seen anybody who does what I'm going into, and so this is awesome to see." So I just think it's important if we can like kind of discuss it a little bit of like some of the things that. Like you just said, Udemy is like, if you have a small budget, something you want to go into, or maybe you just want to learn something, there are places you can go online where you can, take a class. And then I think the gem of it is continuing to progress after you've done the 40-minute course or whatever it is, and then learning more and being creative without having that guy to tell you, press 1, press 2, press 3, but doing it on your own.
I think the biggest sort of thing is like it's gonna sound sort of like duh, but it's like just make stuff. Like I actually think like that's the number one thing is that I think people have this thought that like even if like you may be super talented and like whatever, but like when you start out at anything, you're not going to be great at it. And I think like people use that as an excuse of like they run into a stumbling block or they don't know how to do something yet as like a reason to like when they do it, they want it to be incredible. And so like that's an excuse to like not do it. And instead it's like I would have the opposite mentality, which is like, what's the crappiest possible idea you have? Like what's the worst idea? Like go build that and build it as fast as you can. And like after you're done, like throw it out and then do another thing and just keep doing that as long as you can. Because I actually think like the thing is that there's stuff today that I don't think I'm very good at, and like I've worked on a bunch of games now and there's some things that I used to not be any good at. And at some point, like I picked up that skill and now I'm like, hey, I'm actually pretty good at that thing. Right. And I think, but like the way that happened was just taking shots, like just trying it. Like there was, I mean, it's interesting because like one of the games that we worked on together, right, was Firefall. There was a bunch of stuff where like at some point somebody decided they wanted like the game to become a crafting game, and I took a bunch of swings at like trying to build a crafting game with having no idea how to do that at all, and like. There was a bunch of limitations that like we were dealing with for sure. But like I think back now and I'm like, holy crap, how I'd approach that differently. Like how much I've grown in terms of how I think about games. It's just like
implementation stuff, right?
It's implementation, but it's even just like approach, like having clear goals and being okay with doing a little bit at a time. Like that's why that mentality of like just start making stuff. Like I could tell you like a failure story that I think is maybe prescient. So I talked about earlier, like there was a job at Blizzard I applied for, which was like this balance designer. So I didn't get that, but they liked me and they were like, hey, why don't you apply to be a level designer? I had actually, when I had worked on War 3, I made a couple of the multiplayer maps that were actually in the game, one of which had been pretty popular. And so they were like, oh, maybe you could be one of our map guys, right? And one of the things for the submission for that was you had to make a game using the map editor. Well, I had already made a bunch of like the beginnings of a whole bunch of games, but one of the things is I got super caught up on the details. And so I designed a game. I spent weeks working out like the actual like what I wanted it to be. And I started obsessing over stupid things. Like I wanted the tooltips to have different color codes so that they look different. And so like all the abilities, whatever. Eventually, like it had been like 2 months and I hadn't submitted anything. So I eventually like, decided like, okay, that had been sort of too long. And like, it probably was past the time. So I just emailed them back being like, hey, sorry, but like, I'm not done yet. And like, I feel like maybe like this is a sign that this isn't the right fit or whatever. But then like looking back at it now is like, I was doing the right thing, which is like I worked like night and day on that thing, but I was just prioritizing the wrong problems. Like the things that didn't matter very much, I was spending tons of time on, and I didn't actually just get the game playable like in the first day, which is like a no-brainer now.
Yeah.
But at the time, like I was somebody who hadn't really made any games before.
Gotcha.
I think like the mistake that I made there was like I didn't make the smallest bad thing, right? It's like because if you start out
it's like fail often.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think if you start out with a thing, and even if it's not great, you can look at it and be like, well, what would make this better? Oh, if I change this thing and I added this, okay, let's do that. And as long as you do it that way, it's always very bite-sized. It's always very easy to approach it. It's where it gets scary is when you look at the whole thing and you want to build this big monolithic thing and you're like, where do I start? I guess
you take too many steps back, you start walking away from the whole idea.
No, exactly. It's like you go like, I don't know where to start. I guess I'll start here. You probably choose wrong. But if you're trying to like build this whole thing at once, it's very easy for it to sort of never get there. And so now, I mean, I think I have my sort of style of design is almost the exact opposite, which is like, I'll get an idea and I'll just immediately jump in and start making stuff. And very quickly, I'll learn that the first ones that I made are terrible for various reasons, but I now have stuff to compare them to, and I have like a footing, and I've already thought of the things I would need to make that better. So I can go to an engineer and be like, hey, there's some limitation, like unlock me here because I want to be able to do these types of things. Like it immediately opens up a bunch of sort of pathways to succeed. And so what I found now is that like, it's more about that iteration loop. It's like, how do I make the iteration loop as rapid as possible? And don't worry a ton about having the perfect idea and like having the best design and like, concept. It's like, I've been in discussions about design stuff for like 2 hours. And at the end of it, we all walk up being like, what the hell did we just talk about? You're like,
yeah. Did anybody take notes?
Honestly, like that happens all the time, especially designers. Cause I think we love talking. But yeah, but I think like instead, if you just jump in and start making stuff, by the time somebody might have said like, hey, that thing isn't going to work, whatever, the thing that they're not accounting for is like, you might try that, it might not work, but it might inspire you to do 5 other things that do work. And so like some of the time it's worth just jumping in and trying. And yeah, I mean, like there's a whole feature in the game that I'm working on now where we had this concept of like, okay, there's NPCs, you can go fight NPCs, and it's just basically you play against an AI opponent. That's the gist of it. We talked about like, okay, well, we wanted to have some more interesting PvE content in the game. So like a group of sort of designers got together and we came up with this idea, well, okay, what if we put a bunch of NPCs together, you fight them. So we had that, and that was working, but it wasn't very interesting. It was like, okay, go fight a bunch of NPCs, and like you just beat them and whatever. But then like me and one of the other designers started like powwowing more about like, what if we made this more like a dungeon? And you've got like, we make special, if you played like Clash Royale, you have like special room layouts. Well, we had the tech to make room layouts, but nobody had ever really used it. So I just went in and started making room layouts. And now, like in the game, we have something like 50 different room layouts that are like different towers and walls and whatever. And it ends up being like this whole like little mini game. And we put them together in these like sort of dungeons and with escalating difficulty and like semi-randomized cards. And like it ends up being this whole like little mini game. And like each step along the way, like I didn't know where we were going to get to.
Yeah.
But like it was very easy to go like, well, what if we tried this? And then once it worked, you go like, oh, that's actually cool. Yeah, let's do a lot more. Like the layouts thing is a perfect example where we had a couple layouts. I tried it and people responded like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And so I just started adding more and adding more and adding more. And like when I looked up at some point, I was like, wow, I've got like 40 of these things. That's crazy. So I think there is something. Yeah, it's just like don't worry about solving the whole thing and just getting there and start making stuff.
Are you able to say? Are you able to say what engine you guys are using or no?
Unity.
You are, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. I don't plan on editing this, but just let me know.
I think it's fine. We have a bunch of like internal stuff too, so it's like it's Unity with that.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. I think there's a lot of good gems. Here's another question I have for you, since you have a breadth of experience. How does it feel, development-wise, going from console PC to going to mobile development right now?
Maybe I'll kind of answer your question, and maybe I'll answer it for real. I don't know.
Okay.
So there's two parts to it. So one thing is, by the end of my time at Riot, there's like so many people that are there that are really cool, but the scale they operate at,
it's scary.
It means certain things about the way you develop games. And that element I was saying earlier, where it's like, hey, if you want to grow in a certain way, or you want to learn a new thing, or you are interested in some niche little thing and you want to get involved in it, and you're at a startup, you just go like, hey, I want to do that. And like usually people will be like, cool.
Yeah, you make yourself available.
Everybody needs help. Everybody's shorthanded. Like, do it. And I think one of the elements that was really missing for me was the ability to do that. Like wanting to just be like, hey, it would be cool if like, I worked on this crazy whatever, and like there wasn't a ton of opportunity to do that.
And that's because they already have a person that does it, right?
For everything.
Yeah.
And usually they have people who are way more experienced and talented at that thing, and it's not a bad thing. Like it's actually really like that's a luxury that most companies don't have, right? But it means I think it's actually like bad on sort of two fronts. It's like one is the people who do that thing, like they're sort of like the bottleneck a lot of the time.
It's like you can't. It's like you can't tell them what to do. They're like, "Hey, this is what I do."
No, yeah,
what
right.
Yeah,
like that.
so it's weird.
But like, it's bad in this case of like, okay, we need to do UI. At the company I'm at now, I would just mock something up and like throw it to the UI artist to like finesse and make better. Mm-hmm. But like the gist of it, like I would give you a block out, and like I'm not a UI designer by trade, but it's like I'm not gonna like wait for somebody else. I'm just gonna do it because we've got like
and you know what you want.
UI guy, and so like if everybody waited for that guy, we would never get anything done.
Yeah,
I think at Riot they have many UI people, but the problem is like it still needs to go through them, and so you end up being like, oh, well, instead of like me mocking up UI, instead it's like, well, we have to wait until that person can do it because like they are the experts at that thing, and it also like the other negative is then if you are that person, that you're kind of limited to the types of projects you get to do, which in some ways kind of boring, right? It's like if I'm the UI guy or the systems guy or whatever, it's like a perfect example is like a champion designer. Champion designer might work on 3 champions in 3 years. Like that's.
You mean like fully fleshing them out from finish to end, or you mean just
like that? Like
general?
That's all they do. Like they don't do anything else. They work on 3 champions.
I didn't know it was that
for like
that crazy, that in depth
for like that long. And because like a cycle is just really. I mean, they make really high quality champions, and like the reason is because they do that. Yeah. But the alternative of that is like when I look at like what I've done in my career, like I've worked on so many different things, and like that would actually not be what I'd want to do. Like that's too limiting.
Yeah, you're like a cog in the wheel at that point because you're like, just a little bit. You just need to turn 30 degrees and pass it along. Just keep going.
So part of my interest with Fox actually is that they still have their sort of startup mentality. They're coming off of like a hit with Strike Force, which is like it's cool. Like Marvel, I don't know if you've seen Marvel Strike Force, but it's sort of like a battler where you have characters and you have like all the different superheroes and they can like fight other superheroes and you can build them up and then get stronger and stuff. It's a pretty cool game. But like they have a bit of a hit there.
It's like that Marvel Alliance, like the Marvel Alliance type game that came out a while ago, right?
Maybe
similar.
I don't know.
It's like an arena. You just fighting.
But it's sort of like if you've played Galaxy of Heroes, it's like the Star Wars sort of similar game. But anyway, they have that game, but I think they're still in this like early stages where we're like under like 200 people, and so it still feels like a startup. We're still scrappy. We're still like figuring stuff out, and I think like you still have that capability of like, hey, we need somebody to help out with blah, and if you're interested in it, like go for it, like go help out. So. So that's one of the big draws for me. The other one was when I was at Riot, I was very much in like management. Like I was very much in like leading teams, and like I still was doing some amount of like sort of creative leadership where like, hey, like the shape of the products we're going to work on are X, or the here's some of the features, here are some of like the goals and like the some of the specific elements a little bit, but a lot of that like I was sort of having to delegate all the fun stuff basically, right? It was like making the game, and so that was the other part for me. Is like I really wanted to like go like make games again, where like I'm actually like in there scripting stuff, and I'm actually like
doing the work.
And so that's the big thing. So like even though like I have like lead in my title or whatever, I guess like it's like me and one other designer on the design. Like that's the design team for combat. It's just the two of us, you know. And so we just all the stuff.
Somebody's got to lead the way.
We do it, you know. Like
that's
we do it. So that's why it's cool. And like I'm literally like the only person that does the AI. So like if anybody doesn't like the AI, sorry, it's not my fault. That's totally my fault. But like that's cool. You know what I mean? It's like you like make a whole system and build it up from like nothing to a thing, and it's fun, and you're like, that's awesome. So super rewarding. So so that didn't exactly answer your question though. So those are two of the reasons I'm at Fox, which is like I think they've given me like the opportunity to do those things in an environment that's really fun and
do things you enjoy.
And they're really supportive and a great group of people, especially the leadership team is really
that's good.
So that's cool. Good. But mobile. So the thing that I feel like has changed, there was this period of time where I was like PC Master Race for sure. Like all the games is what we should do. And like I think Riot for a long time as well had that mentality. And I think what shifted is like as I've gotten older, I'm noticing like my time is much more valuable. Yeah. And I just don't have like the time to play the types of games I did when I was growing up. Like, you know, things like an RPG that you could play, you know, play like 50 hours or something. When I hear about like colleagues or whatever playing like Zelda or the most recent Final Fantasy or something, I'm like, man, I loved those games growing up. I mean, I loved them. I played them so much, but I'm like, I would never even sign up for that because I know I'm going to get like 3 hours in and be like, having to put it down for 2 weeks, and when I pick it back up, I'm like, "What the hell was I doing in this
what
game?
is these buttons? I don't understand how to play
I'll
this.
Start over, and it's just like, like I literally like the last couple of Mass Effects, like that was what I got like a couple hours in, put them down for like a week, came back and was like, "What am I doing again? I don't know what's going on." So, so I think that's shifted. I think at the same time, another thing is happening in mobile, which is, I think AAA is actually starting to get there. Like there was a time when mobile games were sort of like not really
aside. They were literally an afterthought. They were just like, hey, you have a phone. Everyone has a phone. You want to play a game on that phone?
Yeah, right.
And it was just like, here's a game, and you're like, oh, why can't this be better?
And I think one of the biggest things has been the limitation on the actual input, right? Like the input on a phone is just not what it is on a console. It's not what it is on a PC. Like you can't, like, just the way you control things. Like every game, it's like a driving game where I have to do this. I'm like, oh my gosh, like just shoot me. It's horrible.
I think touch is paving the way and changing that. I mean, people can touch on their computers now, but which is a glorified large cell phone. Right, but sure. I think touch, when you put the joysticks on there, it's like you're doing something wrong. Because, you know, you'll see a lot of games where they'll put, like, the twin sticks on the phone, and now your thumbs are eating up most of the space. And but there's a lot of games where if they can get the touch right, the swipes and the presses, that's what makes it unique.
It's to understand, like, what the control works well in that environment. There's this game called Archero that I think it just got Game of the Year from somebody, but, like, I can't think of which outlet, but basically, like, very, very good game, like on mobile, like it's got but basically what it is like an action RPG, but the only input is a D-pad. There literally is no attack button. It's just
so you're just sitting there, like,
so you go, and when you let go, you attack. So you move to a spot, like but the gameplay is pretty fun. It's pretty compelling, but it fits well with that device. And like it's sort of like a mini roguelike each time you play. So there's a lot of like replayability factored into it. And it's fun. It's a progression game and it's pretty compelling actually. But like to me, it's leaning into, hey, like we're actually going to make this thing work well. I don't know if you have seen like what's it called, Arena of Valor, or like Mobile Legends, but like any of the MOBAs that are on phones.
Oh, you're talking about the one that super something. What were they called? Vainglory. You mean like Vainglory?
So Vainglory was like one of the first ones, and that was actually going to be my point. So
Yeah.
Vainglory, when they released, they made this whole thing of like, oh, we designed it for phones. But what's interesting is
I played a lot of that game,
Oh,
and I
yeah?
got a lot of people
That's cool.
to play it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting though is that like if you look at after them, like Mobile Legends and Arena of Valor, which like Arena of Valor is King of Glory, which is like basically before Fortnite was like the biggest game in the world. Like it was much larger than League of Legends was. And it's just a mobile. It's basically like a mobile League of Legends clone. Is essentially what it is.
Yeah.
But they had a D-pad. Like that's the big innovation that they added is that they have a D-pad, and that's how you control your character is a D-pad. But it's a very easy to use D-pad. Like it tracks your thumb. So if your thumb moves out of the area, it like follows it. It's just very easy. Is it
an invisible D-pad, or is it like a tangible? Not tangible, but is it like a UI interface of like, oh, you got to put your thumb here?
It's on top. It's like a extra layer on top of the game that basically. So yeah, it's visible basically, and it just shows up like it's like a line element that's like translucent or whatever. But basically it's that, and then they also made all these other improvements. I would call them improvements where they like shortened the game length, and they did like things like you can buy anywhere, and there's like a really simple interface that like an icon pops up and you double tap it and you just buy. And they came up with these things that are like, okay, we're gonna make this game, but we're thinking about it in the context of like a phone.
Yeah.
And before that, like if you talked about a game like League, like comparing League to these like that, like Vainglory, people used to be like, oh yeah, but like Vainglory is the crappy version of League.
It's a totally different type of game.
That being said, Vainglory is a great game. Like I'm not trying to take anything away from it. I'm just saying like that's what sort of in circles that I would run it. That's what people would say.
Yeah, that was the initial, because when it came out, you're like, why didn't League do something like this? And is what I was hearing from people.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Right. But I do think like what happened was like with some of these innovations that happened, like these games are now like action games that are super fun, and they're on mobile, and they work with the actual like interface really well. So I think like, and the other thing is that the cost, because of things like Unity, has gotten a lot lower. So you're also seeing people able to make really high quality, like they spend that money in other places now, and so you have like really cool art that's getting generated, and that. Also, the hardware can actually use that really beautiful art, right? So there's a bunch of it's a confluence of a bunch of things that are happening in mobile. Additionally, I think about 2 years ago, I want to say, mobile eclipsed all other games in terms of revenue generation. So if you were going to predict where games are going, it's mobile. And so,
you mean where they've already went? Yeah,
right. Like, but I mean, even where they're going, it's like year over year they're growing. The industry is growing at a very small amount, and then mobile is growing at a large amount every year.
It's greatly because almost everyone has a phone. Like you can't say that about a console. Families may have a console,
right?
Or maybe they'll have two for whatever. I mean, there's no thing as a LAN party anymore, but phones is almost everyone in the house has a phone.
Yeah.
Everyone in the house is playing a game on that phone, So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
I do think like there's like these things that are happening where you look at stuff like the Switch and you're like, that's also another like sort of attempt at solving that input problem, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like, basically it's a phone from like a tech perspective, like it's a small device with a screen, but they're just like, but what if we gave you a controller that fits into it? And it's like, oh, that's pretty fun actually.
Yeah.
So
I think the crazy thing is if Nintendo and Verizon ever hooked up and made a baby, that would be the best baby in the world with all Nintendo products on it.
I'm sure that's like a bunch of these tech companies are talking about that exact thing. And that's the other bit, right? Is like this stuff's it's fairly expensive, but it's getting cheaper in a way. So like if you have like I've got like an iPhone 10 whatever X Max or whatever, so it's huge and whatever, and it's over $1,000 to buy the phone or whatever. So they're very expensive, but it's a lot easier to justify that purchase because you're like, well, I'll have this for a couple years. It's
Yeah.
my phone and my calendar, and it's like XXX things.
Could you imagine sticking a Qualcomm in a Switch? That'd be nice, right? Think about it.
but
It's small enough to fit.
I actually think like there's a very big possibility though that like, I mean, they already have things like, oh, there's this pen and you can use it to draw on your iPad. It's like, it's not that crazy a thing. Like, what if we had this thing that connects to the side of it? Now you can play like, oh, look, Apple Arcade just launched.
That's
I
true.
wonder if anybody's thinking about this stuff. Like, I just have to guess that like, if that isn't happening very soon, it's happening soon for sure.
I think it has to happen for Nintendo because they are not in the same lane as Xbox and PlayStation anymore. They're not in that same type of. They're in their own lane. But I think with the Switch being in their own lane by themselves and still innovating and still trying to give players what they want and stay true to what they offer, I think in the long run it's going to cost them more because again we're talking about $1,000 cell phone, still a $600 Switch, and then damn near $1,000 console. So it's almost like people are going to have to then make big choices. And like you said, mobile is winning in that choice, but in certain regards. But if it's one of those things where it's like, if Nintendo can figure it out to where they're like, hey, let's give you the best of all these worlds, where we can give you AAA games, AAA mobile games, a cool device that you can play with friends, a cool device that links. Like, because your phones don't really link. You still using old ways of communicating when you're doing like PvP and stuff like that on your phone. But if they can figure that out, man, they're going to be propelled so far. And then the cool thing is that they still got to go switch it out, and it's this even smaller device because you can take the hand things off, and now you still can watch your Netflix on. You can still watch all the things you want on it. The stuff you do on your phone anyway. So
I know. I definitely think it's almost like certainly going to keep going more and more that way going forward. So like that's basically like that's my sort of thinking around it, and like it's funny because like there's these moments that I have that I'm like they're like visions into the future, and like one of them is like my wife who like she's actually like the almost exact same age as me. She's a couple weeks younger than me, and she prefers to not use a mouse on a computer. Like,
she likes just touchscreen.
She'd rather use a touchpad than using a mouse. Like it's like she'll unplug my mouse and use like a touchpad, and I'm like horrified by this every time I see. I'm like, why would you do this? It's so insane. Like, and there's a bunch of people in my work that are in a similar thing where like a lot of us use Macs, and they literally will use their touchpad. Like they never plug in a mouse while they're working.
But you need your middle mouse button.
I'm with you.
So wait, so are there new ways of input on touchpads now where you can have multiple finger impressions and it mimics that or something, or what?
They have. There are you can do like multiple finger touch, and there's like hotkey click to do things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But anyway, it's more just like this sign of like, there's the winds of change are blowing. It's like stuff is going to keep changing like that, and so it feels like. Yeah, we're going to look up in a little while. People are like, why on earth would you have like a controller? Like that seems insane.
People want to interface and interact differently.
Yeah.
Sounds like. Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. So this was awesome. I want to say thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Well, I hope you guys learned something new. If you're thinking about design in any aspect, I think this video is going to be very informational for you, and you'll be able to learn a lot because our guest has approached design on many different facets and has been able to work in that regard on those areas of design. So thank you very much. Hope you learned something new. Have a good one.